Hello everyone, and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Thursday, December 8th, and I hope you all are having a wonderful day so far. I'm your host, William Willis, and in today's show, we're going to bring you some fantastic interviews with incredible guests from around the world. So stay tuned. As always, I'm going to start off with our Techstrong News recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines that are making waves. Then we will head over to Allen, where he will speak to Yishi Novel, Chief Strategist and CMO at Kaito Networks, to talk about how it became the fastest growing enterprise network security startup with annual recurring revenue growing from 1 million to 100 million in just 5 years. Then we go to KubeCon Cloud Native Con North America, where Allen met with Jim Douglas, CEO at Armory, and Fernando Freire, Principal Engineer and Engineering Manager at Armory, to talk about the evolution of delivery platforms of the past decade, how to fit in the environments people are using, and how to leverage infrastructure that is already present. Also at KubeCon Cloud Native Con, Allen spoke with Asaf Cohen, CTO and co-founder of Permit.io, to give a deep dive into Permit.io, the only full-stack permission solution on the market. We're then joined by our very own Cody J. Brown, who will hop on and tell us more about some of our upcoming webinars. Next up, we are airing episode 3 of our series, Engineering the Change. This series will follow the 3 winners of the Engineering the Change Scholarship Program as they tackle a 10-week intensive coding bootcamp and prepare themselves for careers in software engineering. Then we will be airing episode 20 of The Lab with Brendan O'Leary, where Brendan tells us about this month's GitLab release. Then Mike Rothman will speak with Teleport CMO Michael Ferranti as Michael fills us in on their recent report highlighting access and security challenges as infrastructure becomes more complex. Then we go to Qualys Security Conference 2022, where Allen met with Qualys CISO Jonathan Troll to discuss the priorities of security teams leading into 2023. Also at Qualys Security Conference, Allen spoke with Delane Miley, Senior Cloud Security Engineer at Mercury Financial, about methods that drive compliance and remediation efficiency. We will then wrap up this broadcast with 2 episodes of View with Vizard. In the first episode, Mike Vizard interviews AppMap CEO Elizabeth Lawler, as Elizabeth explains why observability needs to shift left to ensure the best application developer experience possible. Then Mike will interview Tom Gillis, Senior Vice President and General Manager of the Network and Advanced Security Group at VMware, as Tom explains how Project North Star will finally unify the management of networking and cybersecurity in the multi-cloud age. And that's what we have coming up for you here on this episode of Techstrong TV. So without further ado, let's get the show started. Enjoy.
Do you know what you want?
Can we afford this place?
I'm thinking a 1,000-piece Kubernetes, cloud workload protection, and XDR combo.
Yeah, I actually don't see any prices.
Hello, how can I schedule a demo for you today?
So we're on a budget.
Okay.
How much is your 1,000-piece Kubernetes?
What solutions are you currently evaluating?
You don't have to order off that thing.
We don't?
How did you get in here?
Check this out.
Optic secret dollar menu.
Order today and you can secure any combo of cloud and endpoint assets through the end of next year. All for $1.
What if I want to secure 100 Mac laptops and 900 Linux servers?
Yeah, $1.
What if I want 500 laptops and 500 Kubernetes nodes? Just $1?
Yep, mix and match to create the combo that works for you.
What about customer support?
Yep, everything for just $1.
We're gonna order off the Uptick secret dollar menu.
And seriously, how did you get in here?
Seriously.
Seriously.
Try the Uptick's combo of CNAP and XDR delivered in a single UI and data model. Just $1 to secure your cloud, containers, and laptops through the end of next year. Offer ends December 31st.
Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for December 8th. First up, the top hospital in India is moving its way back to normalcy after a cyber attack has hampered its operations for nearly 2 weeks. Online registration of patients only resumed 2 days ago at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. It is currently unknown who conducted the attack, but it was followed by several failed attempts to hack into India's top medical research organization, raising concerns of the security of India's health systems. India launched an initiative to digitize health records of patients last September, with over 173,000 hospitals registering for the program since. This being said, experts fear that the hospitals might not have the ability to keep these records safe, and further action might be needed. Next, the newly founded Japanese semiconductor company, Rapidus, signed an agreement to collaborate with a Belgian research organization to develop the next generation of semiconductors for production. Rapidus, which only launched last month, has already signed an agreement to team up with IMEC, a research organization known for nanoelectronics. The two plan to develop and mass produce a 2-nanometer chip by 2027. Rapidus has said it will send engineers to IMEC and forge other ties with research labs outside of Japan as well. Japan was once a leader in the semiconductor development and production industry, and with this new deal, Rapidus plans to bring Japan back up to the top. In other news, in the move towards clean energy sources, the U.S. auctioned its first ever leases to develop commercial-scale floating wind farms off the West Coast. What's more is that the 5 leases drew strong interest from over 43 companies from around the world. While offshore wind is established in other countries, such as the UK, the United States is just beginning to jump into this energy sector. While the diversification of energy is partially needed for clean energy, developing offshore wind farms has become significantly cheaper, approximately 60% since 2010. Currently, there is only 123 megawatts of floating offshore wind operating, but is expected to increase to 19 gigawatts by the end of 2030. The U.S. is currently planning 2 other sites for auction in the next 2 years. Next, amidst regulatory scrutiny and delayed adoption of autonomous vehicles, Uber has partnered with the driverless technology company Motional to launch a public robotaxi service in Las Vegas. This launch is part of a 10-year agreement between the companies for driverless vehicles that will drive both passengers and delivery items. Riders are currently not being charged, but will be when this program launches commercially. Zooming out, rideshare platforms are pushing towards robotaxis, with both Uber and Lyft making deals with driverless technology companies. Uber plans to make a fully driverless experience available to the public by 2023. On Security Boulevard, we have an article looking at a survey showing the shift towards passwordless access. In a survey of over 500 professionals, 87% says that they are moving towards some sort of passwordless approach. However, 80% said that they still use passwords as a security method, showing that there's still a long way to go. To learn more, go to securityboulevard.com. On DevOps.com, we have an article looking at the cultural and technical challenges of DevSecOps. From a global survey of over 600 IT professionals, 71% cited culture as the biggest barrier to the adoption of DevSecOps. Additionally, 57% of the respondents stated that security threats were the biggest technology challenge to driving the adoption. To learn more, go to devops.com. Finally, on Container Journal, we have an article looking at our 5 predictions for Kubernetes in 2023. Kubernetes will only continue to grow throughout next year, yet we need to ask ourselves what we need to know as Kubernetes adoption spreads. This article looks at 5 things we believe you should pay attention to if Kubernetes is important to your organization. To learn more, go to containerjournal.com. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Techstrong TV. Our next guest here on Techstrong TV is Yishai Yovel. Yishai is with Cato Networks, and look, I've been aware of Cato for a while now in the security space. I assume many of you out here have heard of Cato, and probably more than a few of you are very familiar with Cato. But just in case, not to worry, we're gonna first of all welcome Yishai. Yishai, welcome to Techstrong TV. why don't we start with that, with Cato? Give us a little background on Cato and maybe a little of your own background.
Okay. So first, great to be here. So Cato Networks is an 8-year-old company. It's a network security startup that has innovated the convergence of networking and security into the cloud. So when we sat down back in 2015 and we looked at the appliance world, which our founders came from, Shlomo Kramer is the co-founder of Checkpoint software. The idea was to take networking and security and deliver them as a cloud service. It sounds relatively simple and straightforward, but technologically it's a huge challenge. And what we have done over the past 8 years is actually build out a platform, a cloud service with almost 80 points of presence worldwide that deliver a wide range of networking, network security capabilities, firewalling, secure web gateway, CASB, anti-malware, IPS, quite a few of those, and deliver it to over 1,500 customers worldwide, 23,000 locations, 500,000 remote users. So I think what we have done is prove over the last 8 years that it's possible to deliver these kind of capabilities at scale from the cloud. And I think it's actually a great news for a lot of our audience in the tech community.
Love it. So Yishai, our audience, as I mentioned off camera, is very technical. But about, maybe 40% of it comes from a cyber background. The rest come from DevOps, cloud native, that software development, testing, the gamut. Some of the developers, when we talk security, they think in terms of DevSecOps, testing code, making sure code is more secure. But I don't know if they fully understand the challenges of trying to do, what was traditional network security, putting big appliances right at the entrance to the castle and having a moat, right? And you had a choke point with a firewall or what have you. Saying I'm going to do that from the cloud sounds very easy, as you said, but it's really very hard because you don't have that choke point necessarily. You don't have that big box sitting in front of the LAN. There may not even be a LAN. It's a WAN. It's work from anywhere. Why don't we first talk about really some of the challenges that Cato, tackles here in when we talk about moving it to the cloud?
Right. And I think you made a very good point about the choke point, right? So if you think about this big appliance or appliances, they are present in certain locations where traffic must go to in order to be processed, inspected, secure, and then go to the internet or to the cloud. And it had worked in a world where everything was centralized. We had applications in a data center where we would put this firewall. So all the traffic would go to the data center, and from there it will go either to applications on-prem or to the few applications that were on the internet or in the cloud. And we moved to a world where it's everywhere to everywhere. Users can be everywhere and applications can be everywhere, right? These cloud native folks, they are part of this movement of moving on-premise applications to the cloud, delivering applications from the cloud, doing it in a global fashion. So you may have multiple applications running in different regions. So ultimately, where do you put security here? Where is the choke point? There is no choke point. And the Cato innovation is this cloud service with 80 points of presence is in the middle of everything. Okay, so it is basically this hub, the switchboard where all traffic goes through and then comes out of, and whatever session you have, user to an application, device to an application, IoT to the cloud, it doesn't matter what the edge is, what the source is, or what the destination is, there is always this security layer that sits in the middle of everything. And that's a very big change from the traditional model where appliances were sitting by themselves in some edge and all the traffic has to be artificially and awkwardly get to them just to be inspected. we take away this trombone effect, if you like, which is routing traffic in an inefficient way just to have it inspected by devices that were built for a centralized world, which doesn't exist anymore.
Absolutely. Excellent. And look, this is not new, obviously, right? We've been exposed to cloud now for 15 plus years. I think people are understanding, you have identity and access management to cloud resources. There is no more centralized, LAN type of thing. But so it's all in there. Now, but to take that as a business model, and recently Cato reached a kind of milestone here of $100 million ARR, is that correct?
That's correct.
I mean, that's $1 million here, $1 million there. Before you know it, it's a lot of money.
That's right.
That's a significant amount of money on that business model, right? Of delivering this security via the cloud. What does that mean? What do you think it means to our audience? Why, beyond it's a lot of money, Yishai, right? No, Yishai, everyone knows that, but what does it mean?
So I think the first thing is that Cato has been working hard to prove that we can operate at the scale, at the resiliency, at the capability level that enterprises expect. It's not trivial. You used to do something for 20 years in a certain way. Somebody comes in and say, we're going to do it completely differently, and we're going to do it in the most mission critical part of your business, which is your network that connects everybody and the security that protects everybody. So when you reach 100 million with the number of customers we have, the locations, the clouds, all these different users, I think customers, first of all, have a confidence that this is not a novel idea. It's not a concept. It's not a startup that is trying to, prove something, but that in fact, it has been proven. So I think that's the first thing, is customers of all sizes can feel confident to consider cloud migration of the networking and security infrastructure. And as you said, almost everything is gone to the cloud in some shape or form. And networking and security, the network security, these appliance elimination, replacement, is something that is very new, or it is the last pillar of IT infrastructure to really move to the cloud. I think that's the first thing, is there is confidence in the ability to take this idea, this vision of convergence in the cloud for these pillars and adapt it, because so many organizations have in mission critical environments, in retail, in manufacturing, in legal, in finance, it works. The second thing is obviously that we are now over 700 people. We have a massive roadmap to deliver a very large amount of new capabilities continuously. That's a benefit of the cloud model. If you're familiar with appliances, and the audience is, you know that appliance vendors release a new version every 6 months, every 9 months. There's a new build for the appliance that has these new features. We release new features every 2 weeks. So we can run 26 upgrades of the cloud every year. So there is this wave of new capabilities that customer basically can access, can utilize without upgrades, without patches, without all this hard work of just bringing all the physical infrastructure up to speed. So they're going to get more capabilities. They're going to get them faster. They can adopt them faster. And what's nice about convergence is that their TCO, their total cost of ownership, is not going to change. Meaning if you need to consume 20 features of security and you want to go to 30, today, it means more point solutions, more people to maintain them. You need experts just for these functions. Here, everything comes through the same model, same platform. You're actually going to be able to keep the same team, more or less, and adopt so much more capabilities, so many more capabilities, which is the value of the cloud. So production scale, more features, delivered faster, that you can consume with a smaller team. I think that's where networking and security is going.
I agree with you. First of all, we got to do faster. We got to be more inclusive, right? Security is everyone's responsibility, and we also need to deliver results. You know, we were kidding before coming on. I was out at Vegas last week for the AWS reInvent show, and besides a lot of our people getting sick there, security was so like right in your face. Security was job one, right, for everything. And reInvent, there's developers, there's security people, there's operations people, it's everything. But I think never before have we seen security become so front and center, right? As you know, everyone really focuses in on it. Look, that's got to mean something for Cato Networks going forward too. What do you think, Yishai? Where does this emphasis on security? It's obviously got to help, but how does Cato use that to help our audience?
So when we think about cloud or cloud data centers, cloud applications, they are edges to our cloud network, meaning we are inspecting all the traffic going in and out of these cloud data centers and in and out of the SaaS applications that the organization is using, Office 365, Drive, Dropbox, all these guys. So you actually get the same engine, the same layers of security, basically dealing with the production traffic, okay? Meaning that basically we can look for threats, trying to target the cloud data centers, or if something got a hold of the data center, if they're trying to come out, we actually going to intercept it. And so Cato provides this a leveling of the playing field, right? It's not one solution for on-prem and one other solution for the cloud. It's also cloud agnostic because we are the switch or the hub. Then we treat Microsoft Azure traffic like we would treat AWS traffic, like we would treat Google traffic. So all of these capabilities are consistently enforced across all clouds and all applications. So that's another dimension where we do. And in fact, if you look at our customer base, there are probably over 500 cloud data centers connected to the Cato infrastructure as yet another edge, meaning for within an organization, some of our customers have 7 or 8 cloud data centers globally, and they're all part of the same policy, the same governance, the same control, and it also gives the customers and the IT audience the freedom to migrate applications from on-prem to the cloud and back. It doesn't matter where the application is, there are going to be controls applied to it, regardless of where it is, so customers can gradually migrate. And this is something that, unlike startups that tend to focus on the future, okay, we're going to develop just cloud security, we actually, with our solution, we are backward and forward compatible. We would protect your applications in on-prem and in the cloud in the same way.
Got it. Makes perfect sense. Yishai, we're almost out of time, but for people who want to get more information about Cato, check it out, maybe be contacted, what do you suggest?
So they could come to our website, catonetworks.com. We have a contact us form where you can indicate if you want a demo or you just want to be a call back. I will be very happy to have this conversation. I think that for the vast majority of organizations, Cato can dramatically reduce your cost, your complexity, and empower the team to focus on what's important, which is securing the business instead of maintaining the infrastructure. And I think that's a big value add for all of our customers.
Absolutely. Hey, I want to thank you for coming out here on Techstrong TV. It's been a while since we had an update, and it's good to hear what's happening and continued success at Cato.
Thank you very much, Alan. Great being here and looking forward to our next time.
Okay. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We'll be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, back here in Detroit for KubeCon, continuing our second day of coverage from the show floor. I'm really happy to have back a company that we've covered almost since the company launched, right? Absolutely. Armory.io. They really were the company that took Spinnaker commercial, if you will, right? For those of you who don't know, Spinnaker was an amazing CICD program. Came out of Netflix and Google.
Yep.
It was donated to the CDF Foundation probably about 3-4 years ago now. But Spinnaker is the company that really kind of, if you want to do Spinnaker in a commercial setting, they were, not just the raw open source. They were the experts who kind of pioneered that. I'm really happy to have him back on the show. I don't think we've had anyone from Armory, guys, on Techstrong TV in a while.
It's been too long. We're happy to be
Too long.
here.
And I'm really happy you're back. Maybe it took us coming back in person, right?
Absolutely.
Let me introduce you to my two friends here from Armory. To my immediate right is Jim Douglas. Jim, welcome.
Thank you.
And to Jim's right is, and we're going to do our best, we practice this off camera, Fernando Friday. Friday.
Nailed
I don't do that rolling R, no matter how much I try, but it's that New York. But anyway, Fernando, welcome.
Happy to be here.
We should start off with, what do you guys do at Armory?
Absolutely. I'm president and CEO at Armory. Been here about a year now.
Yep.
Very excited to be with the company. Fernando?
I'm an engineering manager here at Armory. We're primarily developing Spinnaker and innovating the Spinnaker platform.
Fantastic. Welcome, guys. So, I hope I didn't embarrass you talking about kind of the history here and Spinnaker and stuff. But, Spinnaker remains today an amazing tool. Especially, it used to be, well, you're not Netflix. Who is?
Yeah.
But it's an amazing tool. Is it just an enterprise tool, though? Is it, how low does it go?
No, it's not. I mean, a couple things to think about. Just think about this show. It's called KubeCon, right?
Right.
Innovators 10 years ago that started cloud native, there was no tooling. So Google had to invent things like Kubernetes to deploy containers. Netflix has got an outrageous deployment profile, right? 400 apps a day. There's nothing out there that could do that. So they had to build a platform that could handle that. Spinnaker, the key to it is the power to do the multi-problems, I call it. Multi-environment, and multi-target, and multi-cloud. How do you do that at scale? And I think what was really attractive early is a lot of the early teams, the platform teams, wanted to be able to build curated deployment solutions for their developers. And Spinnaker gives you that flexibility to do that. I think what we're seeing, and one of the big highlights here is, like every software industry, I cut my teeth in the kind of EDA or electronic design automation world. You see abstraction over time where you take away complexity, and we're seeing that today, right? A lot of companies here are talking about what's next on top of Kubernetes. And the same thing's going to happen in continuous deployment as kind of the next gen that weren't the kind of innovators, early adopters come along. They're just looking for automation. So for us, Spinnaker is a key part of our story, but our core competency and our focus is really on continuous deployment at scale. And one of the difficult things for the folks that are new to cloud native is they've got this thing called legacy portfolio, right? I was with a major bank on Monday, and half of their applications are still running bare metal VMs. Some of them they've refactored, they've containerized, and new apps they're trying to get into best practices around cloud natives. Like, how do you do that? That's the problem we're trying to solve. And as I said, Spinnaker is one tool for that. We've got some new SaaS tools as well that take the best practices that some of the best teams on the planet have used Spinnaker to actually build deployment strategies around, and fully automated that for the folks that they don't want to spell deployment. They want to use Canary, they want to use Blue-Green, they want to use progressive rollouts, but they don't want to understand them. So we're trying to address that gamut, but the end in mind is, how do you reliably deploy software at scale? As I said, scale is, the world's not just Kubernetes. Kubernetes is important, but it's a lot of different container technologies, it's non-container technologies, and how do you do that to multi-environments, and hybrid cloud is where everybody's going. So
absolutely,
that's what we're trying to nail.
Look, it would be great if we all only worked in green fields.
Absolutely.
I start with a blank piece of paper every time and say, my dream config, my dream process, my dream.
World's not that way.
I wish, right?
Yeah.
But it don't. The world's not that way. The other thing that's interesting, though, look, we're DevOps.com, right?
Yeah.
We're a container journal. When I started DevOps.com 2013, 2014, it was already, no one ever said just CI.
Yep.
It was always like CI/CD. CI/CD. You couldn't say CI without saying CD. And you definitely couldn't say CD without prefacing it with CI.
Yep.
Right? They just went together, peanut butter and jelly, and CI/CD. But interesting things happened over the 8 years. A lot of the tools that were, the powerhouses, the standards 8 years ago, like a Jenkins, for instance. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not bad-mouthing Jenkins, but I don't
It's
think
still
it's a
everywhere,
secret.
so.
No, it is. But look, our audience, we're DevOps.com, damn it. Our audience knows. Jenkins is a little old in the tooth. If you're using cloud-native technologies with Kubernetes, there's Jenkins X. I forgot what they changed the name or whatever, but it's not really the Jenkins itself. It was not really a cloud-native design, for good reason. It came way before.
Yeah.
You're ready to jump. I can tell.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, so Jenkins has been really the mature platform here for a long time. And now you've got newer generations of tools, things like GitHub Actions, things like GitHub CI, all these different tools that are encapsulating a lot of those hard-won lessons over the years with Jenkins.
They're Gen 2, Gen 3.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we're doing with the platforms that we're building. So with our continuous deployment as a service product, we've really taken those decades of experience with continuous delivery, and we're encapsulating them in the product so that you as an organization or you as a DevOps engineer don't have to think about this stuff anymore. You can really focus on the things that your client teams are trying to build, right? Trying to deploy. Because really, at the end of the day, they don't want to think about whether they're using a hammer or a screwdriver, right? They want to think about.
They just want to get it done.
Exactly.
Right. That's. I agree with you.
I think the other thing quickly to talk about is when you're starting that cloud-native journey, you're not ready just to change out all your tooling. So engineers can do anything. Take Jenkins, you write scripts, you can do a basic deployment of Kubernetes.
Sure can.
Done that before in past companies. That was our kind of training wheels, if you would. But at some point, you got to scale. When you get back to the problems I talked about. And so one of the things we're looking at is how do you fit hand in glove in the environment people are in? Like Fernando talked about GitHub Actions. Great tool, once again, back to abstraction, really abstracting away a lot of complexity for developers. Let them live in that environment, but give them a world-class deployment experience. That's really what we're trying to do.
I'll tell you something. Alan's secret to life. I didn't find this out. It's not that profane. But I
profane or
profound.
Maybe.
It is.
You are
profane.
from New York, after all.
Yeah. You're right. But no, seriously, I didn't discover this until I was about 45. I bet. It is about using the right tool for the job. Because using the wrong tool for the job, you may brute force it. You'll eventually get that square peg rounded, but you're gonna bang your head on a lot of walls till it gets. You use the right tool, things go easier. And so to me, in today's environments, cloud native, not lift and shift, but updating existing infrastructure, having a tool designed for the mission,
it's critical.
Yeah, it's a must. It's critical, right? Otherwise, you're just going to make yourself a lot of work, and at the end of the day, it may or may not really work the way you want it to.
Yep. And by the way, there's a lot of great technology available, and a lot of it's here. Like I said, a lot of the buzz is about deployment and cloud native deployment, which is great.
It is. It's all about that. And, the other thing is, so we went through this whole kind of, I call it, the shift left syndrome, security, testing, moving CD into Git. Right, so you got GitOps and all of this stuff. But we need a little focus on shift right too. Right? How do I take the lessons learned, whether it's Canary or feature flags, A/B testing, get that and put, make this kind of circular virtue kind of thing where I'm taking that and redo.
Right.
Today's tools, we need to incorporate that kind of thing, right?
I agree. The thing that I would say, and I don't know if it's a disagreement, is developers shouldn't have to think about that though. It should as you said, move left into that development zone where those capabilities are just there for them. Those are the best practices that their platform teams, their DevOps teams provide them as this beautiful experience.
Yep.
But they definitely have to move farther up in that flow.
I
But what
agree.
we don't want is, we don't want them to have to learn that, right? That's back to abstraction.
Well, so I would say that's a major thing too we deal with is, look, go into an existing team and say, hey, let's change your CD tool.
Yeah.
Right?
That sounds great.
Yeah, wait. Let me clear the decks here for the next 2 months. I'll talk to you in January.
Exactly.
How do you deal with that when you go into organizations that aren't using Spinnaker, aren't using a modern CD platform, and how do you convince them to, hey man, we should,
Let me tee it up and I'll have good examples. First of all, we don't try to convince them because, like I said, they've got those investments for a reason, and they're bolted in, as you said. Every one of our customers, just about, I'm exaggerating a little, uses Jenkins for something in their SDLC. Trying to get them to rip that out, fool's errand. So it's how do you leverage what infrastructure you already have, but once again, fit that into a world-class deployment scenario. So I'll use Spinnaker as an example. Spinnaker can do a lot more than just deployment. It can do some delivery aspects, it can do some orchestration, but if you've got capabilities to do that are working for you now, you can weave that into that environment and just take advantage of the deployment capabilities. Same thing with our SaaS solution. Over time, as you evolve, right, we're going to help you on a journey to get next gen and those capabilities, but the discussion's never about what you're going to take out. It's going to be how you can extend that. So maybe take that thread and pull it.
And to add on to that, I mean, really what we try and do when we talk with our customers is encourage them to crawl, walk, and run, right? You're not going to go from day zero, start deploying 100 times a day, right? That's never going to happen for an organization that's just starting down that journey. So really what we try and do is partner with these customers and make sure that they understand this is the journey that you're going to go on, and this is how our products help you get to that point, right? So day one is maybe just going to be taking that script that you are already running on your Jenkins machine, or heaven forbid, your local laptop, right? And moving that into either continuous deployment as a service or continuous deployment self-hosted, right? And either way, right, that's the first step. And then just build on top of that and get more and successively more automated until you get to the point where you can do those deployments. Once you're at that point, you can then take that and start thinking about, well, what does it mean for my service to be highly available? What kind of strategies do I need to implement? And those are all things that we help you and guide you through, both through the product and kind of the coaching that we provide.
Yeah. Very cool. You know, we're doing we do it every year, a virtual event called DevOps Experience. It's coming up November 16th this year. And we try to kind of highlight, well, what's kind of the new frontiers? What's the new things? So this year we call it DevOps Everywhere. Distributed DevOps.
Yep.
DevOps at the edge and beyond. DevOps of things. IoT and stuff. I got to imagine you guys are running into this, because that's where the action lives today.
Yep.
Right. It's not just at that cloud core anymore. It's everywhere.
Right.
Software is eating the world already, and wherever software goes, DevOps goes with it, and CI/CD is an intimate part of that.
Right.
What are you seeing on that end? Like sort of non-traditional?
Yeah, I'd say twofold. One is you've seen compute cycles, right? Centralized, decentralized. Cloud's here to stay because it's very
not
efficient.
going anywhere.
But to your point, compute's got to move where the data originates in a lot of cases. And a lot of that, you think about the IoT trend, right? A lot of the devices that you have the edge of networks, very low latency devices that have to operate in real time. You can't wait for information to come down from the cloud. So you're going to have to be able to prosecute workloads at the edge. So from a deployment standpoint, for folks that are building cloud native, their world has been everything to the cloud. Now it's got to be about how do you deploy to multiple points in that topology. I think one of the things you're seeing, and this is kind of my past life, I used to be the CEO at Wind River, so I was enmeshed in that, is those people trying to abstract a lot of that embedded software higher level and start to virtualize it so they can use cloud native practices
and they can update it and so they can update it versus be part of the whole thing.
Exactly. So to your point, CI/CD is going to have to evolve where your targets are going to be different. So we talk K8s, your K3s down there, right?
Right.
It's going to be a different service. So we're going to have to look at things like that over time. And I see that as a big trend too.
Mm-hmm. So what's Armory doing around that? I don't mean to put you guys on the spot, but hey, man, you're the engineer.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're really excited about what we're building or what we're going to be building over the next year. Really, where we're going to be focusing is on bringing a lot. You saw in 2019, everything that you saw at the conference was, how do I run Kubernetes? Now everything that you're seeing here a couple of years later is, what do I run on top of Kubernetes? That's the same thing that we're doing. We want to make continuous deployment melt into the background and let engineers get back to what they're doing and what they do best. So we're really excited to make a lot of the tools easier and make them more approachable for engineers that are focused on that data science application, or they're focused on that IoT application, right? Anything where they're a domain expert, we want to give them the tools to get back to their work and be productive.
I think one of the keys in there, I'm a broken record, but it's that multi-service or multi-target. So to your point, you're going to have different services at different layers in that compute topology. They shouldn't have to worry about that. Use the same strategies you talked about. The system should have the knowledge to be able to do that deployment for them. That's going to be really key.
Absolutely. Guys, we're probably over time.
It's okay.
If you want to get more information on Armory, it's armory.io.
Correct.
It's ARMORY.io, right?
Fantastic. It was easier than his last name.
There's none of those R's. People from New York have problems with R's anyway. It's like sister, brother.
There you go.
But anyway, hey, Fernando,
Fantastic.
Jim.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on Techstrong TV. Enjoy the rest of KubeCon. Armory.io here on Techstrong TV. We're live in Detroit. We'll be back in just a minute with our next guest.
Thanks.
This is Techstrong TV.
All right. Hey, everyone. We're back. We're back in Detroit live on the show floor. I hope you've been watching our day 2 coverage. Of course, Mitchell Ashley, our CTO and principal analyst, has been doing some of our interviews today, lessening the load on me. I appreciate it. But I'm back here for this one, and I'm happy to introduce you to Asaf Cohen. Asaf is with a company called Permit. It's permit.io, and we are going to find out about them right now. Hey, Asaf, how are you?
Hi, Alan. Great to be here.
Great to have you here.
Yeah.
So, Asaf, well, before we even get into Permit, let's hear a little bit about your story. How do you come here?
So my background is in cybersecurity. I used to be in the IDF intelligence forces, 8200, if anyone knows what it is, 8200. And from there, I worked at a few cool companies in the industry. I was a software engineer at Microsoft. I worked on the Xbox product. Yes. After that, I was one of the first engineers in a company called Clarity in cybersecurity. And finally, I was a software engineer at Facebook, where I did developer tools for engineers within the company.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. And,
very internal.
Now I'm the co-founder of Permit.
Good for you.
Yeah.
So I've got 25 years in cyber. I'm pretty familiar with cyber. We didn't call it cyber.
Yeah.
We called it security.
Yeah.
But anyway, talk to me about Permit. What does it do?
Yeah, so Permit is actually the only full stack permission solution in the market. So first of all, we need to understand why permissions are such a big problem. So companies, when they build software products, they have to do things like authentication, understanding who the users are, and there are plenty solutions in the market like Auth0 and Okta and Ping Identity. But after they understand who the user is, so you're Ellen, what are you allowed to do within my app? What features can you access? What resources can you touch? What database, objects, whatever? And in order to build that, it's a big challenge. So you have to model your system. Developers need to understand what role-based access control is, how to do audit logs. There's a lot of challenges here. So what Permit is trying to do is basically give you an SDK, an API that you can use to just do it within hours instead of months. Okay, just have it ready, plug into your app, and you have access control, you have permissions, you have everything.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So look, the big change, I've seen big changes during my career. And originally when I was in security, it was very much the perimeter, moat and castle, around the thing.
Yeah.
And it was about ingress and egress into the LAN.
Yeah.
With the advent of cloud native, and distributed networks, distributed applications, IAM, identity and access management, has become the holy grail, right? Because that's how we control who has access to what in the clouds and so forth. And, it was a real problem.
It is.
Frankly.
It is a real problem.
It's still a problem, but it was a bigger problem early on in cloud. We've come up with a lot of, there's now cloud directories and the whole concept of zero trust.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not giving you access to anything. Because before it was you had access to nothing or everything. Now it's, you don't need access to everything, and you don't need access to everything every time, at all times. So it's become much more sophisticated.
Definitely.
But from what you're saying, Permit allows you all of these things and more, a very fine granularity.
Yeah.
But almost like you said it once and then it's portable into different infrastructure. I'm on Google today, I'm on AWS, I'm on Microsoft, whatever.
Yeah.
And I can move it?
So the thing is, Permit can be used for infrastructure permissions. So Permit is like IAM that you can actually embed within your application, within your
network. You can put it right into the app. So
you can just plug it in. But typically you would use it for end user access and not for infrastructure access. You can use it for infrastructure access, but our main goal is to make it easier for applications, because for that you have nothing. So you do have today IAM solutions for infra, and you can configure IAM through stuff like Terraform and Pulumi and whatever and whatnot. And for applications you have nothing. So Permit is really
end user application.
A new thing in the market that you didn't have before. Yeah.
And so give me an idea of what's the end user experience like with Permit?
Yeah, so first there's the developer that starts implementing Permit. So he gets APIs and SDKs and he can integrate into his application, and we give him a low-code policy editor that he can use to create a policy that says these are the users that allow this and these are the users that allow that. So for example, role-based access control, it can create roles and permissions and whatnot. The end user, and that's actually the special thing about Permit, can get embeddable access components that are meant for him, for end users. So if a company is a client of Permit, they can embed end user experiences within their front end. So they don't have to build that as well. So think about user management screens, think about API key management, think about impersonation features, share sheets, everything you need to delegate access to your end users and let them control that themselves and not bug you for that. That's what we're trying to do.
All right, I get it. That's a beautiful thing. So how is this offered? It's not a hosted service or anything.
Yes.
How's it offered? How's it sold?
So that's a good question. So Permit is a SaaS solution that manages policy agents on your end. So the way it works, there's a lot of companies in the markets that give you an API and say, okay, now ping my cloud. Every time you need to enforce access and say, is this allowed or not?
Right.
This is not good for your app for a few reasons. First, latency. So even if they reduce the latency within their network to 1 millisecond, it's still their network latency. You are not in their cloud.
Right.
So add to that, and it cripples your app. And the second reason is resiliency. What if their cloud is down? What if AWS itself is down and they cannot control that? Your app is crippled. So what we do, we give you an edge container that you put in your network that is controlled from the central cloud and can completely work offline and is independent of the central cloud. So we just download updates every time there is a change. Yeah, but we are not necessarily...
But the whole thing is
completely
independently working within a container.
So it's essentially a microservice within your network.
Your app and your...
that we give you the code and we manage it for you, but it's completely independent,
Beautiful. And how do you price it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So first of all, Permit is free up to 1,000 users that you are enforcing access on every month. okay? But we actually look at usage-based tiers where the amount of users you enforce access to reflects in the price. So 2,000 users, if you have them, that's great. If you have 1 million users, you get a different value from us, so it costs more, and that's how it works.
Excellent, man. I love it. It's permit.io.
Yes, permit.io.
Okay. Cloud agnostic. Well, it really doesn't make a difference because it lives within the app itself.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
because it's a different thing than authentication. People are mixing them up, but for authentication, you can live in the gateway. If a company like Auth0, which I love, by the way, it's a great company, if Auth0 is down, you're good because most of your users have a JSON Web Token and a session, and they will continue accessing the app, and they will recover in a few minutes, and you'll be fine. But if you don't do authorization or permissions within your app locally, if somebody else's service is down, your entire application is crippled. So it's a different ball game.
Very big thing.
It's a big thing.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Because the traditional, not just authentication, but the traditional model has been you go out, whether it's a sandbox or something, but you're dependent. Having it back here is a great thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting. How are you finding the show?
Oh, I love the show. We are seeing great engagement here at KubeCon. So at the booth, people are coming, asking questions. We tell them about the product. We show them the new features. We ask how are they solving permissions and access control, what it looks like in their organization. There are great conversations happening here. I also saw great engagement in SecurityCon. So I had a talk at SecurityCon about Opal, or open source offering.
Sure.
And people were really interested. So I do have this control plane for policy agents that is open source and I can use. And people are really engaged and were really curious how this can solve their problems if they're building on their own. So there is a solution for that as well.
So I want to make clear, is Permit using OPA?
So under the hood, Permit uses policy agents and specifically OPA, Open Policy Agent as well. And you can actually plug into that with your Git and you can have pull requests that affect policy and you can review them and everything. But we will support more policy agents in the future because we want to, everything that the community uses, we want to support because we don't want to force any use case on you, want to be part of the solution. So it's important to support more policy agents.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Excellent. Asaf, that was a great description. So it is permit.io.
Yeah.
Check it out. I think it sounds fantastic. It's a good new way to think about, application access here. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in a moment.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey everyone, happy Thursday. Cody J. Brown here with some programs happening next week at Techstrong Learning. We're starting our first program Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern with a roundtable discussion on digital transformation. Led by our very own Mike Vizard, we'll have DevOps experts joining us to break down the essentials for bringing digital transformation that scales from small business to the enterprise level. We'll cover what steps should be taken to increase the speed and reliability of your systems and how to provide up-to-date application experiences. Following, at 3 p.m. Eastern, we have security experts from ThreatX and Cyberway US to present their 2023 economic forecasts and how organizations should consider resources in the instance of a downturn. They'll highlight security trends to keep an eye on as we move into the new year and how to co-manage both risk and cost. Join us on Security Boulevard for Winter is Coming. 2023 security predictions and strategies to weather the storm. Now, join us back Tuesday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern for our final Insights Forum of 2022. Brought to you by Sumo Logic and AWS, we've got a stacked panel discussion on DevOps trends, predictions, and New Year's resolutions. This year in review, we'll touch on the DevOps innovations and challenges, the driving factors behind DevOps, and what will drive DevOps moving forward into the new year. So that's all I've got for you until Monday, but we have even more programs next week that I didn't mention, and if you just can't wait until then, go ahead and look through our on-demand programs at devops.com/webinars, and be sure to look in the on-demand section. Have a great Friday and a better weekend, everyone.
Previously on Engineering the Change.
The program at Boca Code was amazing.
My career has completely changed from barely being able to, hold down a job to now being sought after by some of the biggest tech companies in the world.
Boca Code has built me up.
If you grant me the scholarship, like I said, I will share my knowledge with people, with women or immigrants.
Dreamed of having the opportunity to show the world, how great, I can be.
I feel that anything I do my best in, so wherever I end up, I'm going to do the best I can to make sure I'm making a positive impact. So this scholarship would definitely assist me in changing the trajectory of my life.
Excited to tell Carly about her winning. She is so pumped to really embark on her career as a software engineer. All right, Carly, we got the whole camera crew with us. All right, come on in, guys. We're coming in. Carly, I'm sorry, your name?
Harold.
Harold?
Yes.
So we're making this presentation of $10,000.
You got it?
Puppies. This go right in.
Is this?
For sure? Oh, we have the camera.
Huh? What?
Puppies coming over here. Hey, how you doing? Donald, we're here. Hey, man. How are you? I want to present you with this.
Oh, my gosh.
We had a tough time. We couldn't pick the finalists. You guys are all great. You think you're going to be great engineers. So you're in.
Oh, my gosh. Awesome. Thank you so much. This is a very awesome opportunity, and I look forward to strive for the best. Awesome. Thank you.
You're going to be a great engineer, man. Thank you so much, Donald. This was by far the strongest class of people we had who applied for the scholarship. We were able to get it down to 3 finalists, but then in meeting with the judges, we couldn't pick a winner. So what we decided to do is just pick all 3 finalists as winners, and so we want to make this contribution to your life. And we're going to award Stephanie Sanchez as one of our 3 Spring 2022 winners of the Engineering the Change Scholarship. Stephanie, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Hey everyone, I'm Alan Schimmel, CEO of Techstrong Group. We are a tech media company based here in Boca Raton, Florida, and we have been for 8 years. I've been a resident of Boca Raton for 20 years now, and it's always been one of my hopes, aspirations, is that South Florida would become a tech hub. So we opened this program, it's called Engineering the Change, to underserved communities including women, people of color, but any underserved community in the tech space, right? When I look back, and we have some of the past winners here with us, and I look at the difference it's made in the community, in their lives, it's something to be really proud of.
So, one of the things that Boca Code really takes is partnerships with companies like Techstrong and other local companies, because we need them to, to help support the school, and we need them to, to hire and interview our students as well.
We're going to introduce some of our past winners and just have them briefly talk a little bit about, how their life has gone since taking this class.
When I received the scholarship, I had a lot of mixed emotions. I was scared but excited for this new chapter. I had worked in the tech industry, but I had never been in an engineering role. The people at Boca Code, Todd, who I affectionately call Coach, because I kind of think of him as the coach in a game, they guide me step by step the whole process. When I graduated from the cohort, I had over 10 offers from tier 2 and tier 1 tech companies, and I had my pick, which was the first time in my life I really had to make a choice where it was completely my decision.
The scholarship changed my life really from 0 to 100. As I said before, I was in a state that I was really lost in terms of my career. I had a neuroscience degree from FAU, but I couldn't get a job. Once I got the scholarship and I did the 10 weeks at Boca Code, it completely changed my life to better, because now I have found actually my passion, which is not just tech, but being able to help women get into this field.
Winning the scholarship was once in a lifetime opportunity to change my career. The program at Boca Code was amazing. I studied a lot of fundamentals of software engineering, and I proved myself that I'm capable of being a successful developer. At that time, I couldn't even imagine how I would need this job in 3 months when the war hit my homeland, Ukraine, and this salary of software developer gave me opportunity to help Ukrainian people in this hard time.
So this year, we wound up with 3 finalists for the scholarship, and we brought them into our panel of judges, and each of the finalists were interviewed. And then the judges got together and we had to pick just one. We tried to pick just one, and we really couldn't pick just one. And they were 3 outstanding candidates. And so what we've decided is to give all 3 of them scholarships. First person is Carly Dorless.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. So
I'll hold the check for you.
I will do my best to be successful and to help other women and other people.
Our next winner of the Engineering the Change Scholarship for 2022 is a gentleman named Donald Vizio, and Donald will tell you his story. Donald, come on up.
First of all, I want to thank Techstrong, Todd, for introducing me to the scholarship. And, this is an amazing opportunity coming from Haiti. And I hope with this opportunity that Techstrong and Todd introduced me to, I hope to introduce it to others just like myself and give back to my community and show them that, software engineering is cool. It's not just for nerds.
Our third winner for this year's Engineering the Change Scholarship is Stephanie Sanchez.
First of all, thank you both for this opportunity, and congratulations to my fellow recipients. I know we're going to make a significant change in the world. I come from a background of social work, and so I hope to be able to continue to put the people aspect in technology as we help others around us. I'm so grateful to be able to be a part of this. Thank you.
Hello, friends, and welcome to The Lab, a monthly show where we look at the latest and greatest developments in software development, DevOps, and the cloud. I'm your host, Brennan O'Leary, and coming today from a seasonably cool Annapolis, Maryland, on the East Coast of the United States. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm a staff developer evangelist at GitLab, which means that I get to talk to amazing folks throughout the software engineering space about what it means to get code shipped to production. And we have a great episode for you today. The GitLab 15.6 release is out and brings cutting-edge new capabilities to GitLab's DevSecOps platform. We have exciting new product updates that are going to help developers and other folks collaborate and deliver software more securely. And we're thrilled to dive into some of those 15.6 updates and also discuss GitLab's latest enhancements to security and governance and the solutions around that. And I have with me here today GitLab Director of Product Management, Hillary Benson, a friend of the program, who will join us later in the show to discuss some exciting new security features. But first, as always, let's dive into some of the key updates that I saw when I was looking at the GitLab 15.6 update. First, we introduced Git abuse rate limiting. This is a really helpful feature that notifies administrators when a user downloads or clones more than a specified number of repositories in a group or subgroup within a given time frame. And you can also automatically ban users who exceed that rate limit so that those users won't be able to access, the group or its non-public subgroups. Now, of course, that won't affect unrelated groups to that, but it will help you kind of curb if someone's trying to download a lot of data from your group. And these bans are permanent by default, but a group administrator can unban an affected user if it was kind of an erroneous ban and they were doing that for some legitimate purpose. Also have new group and subgroup level scan result policies. So now you can manage those scan result policies at the group level or at the subgroup level. And these policies then automatically flow down and apply to all the projects inside of a group, which makes it a lot easier to kind of enforce those policies uniformly for a large organization that might have a large number of projects or groups within GitLab. And so to get started, just in your group or subgroup, if you're the owner of it, you can link the associated security policy on the security compliance policies page. To kind of go along with that comes a scan execution policy support for dependency scanning. So you can now require dependency scanning to run on a regular schedule or as part of the project's CI/CD pipelines, independent of what is inside of the GitLab CI YAML. This will allow security teams to manage those scan requirements separately and universally without allowing developers to then forget or change those configurations. It's also very easy to get started by creating a scan execution policy under security and compliance again in the policies page. One that is near and dear to my heart is support for special characters in CI/CD variables. So previously, it was very difficult to use, like the $ character in a variable, because that normally signifies the start of another, environmental variable. And so GitLab would interpret it and try to expand it. But in this release, we added an expand keyword, which will allow you to say, this is a raw variable that we don't want expanded. It has, a $ in it. And this raw variable can contain, any special characters and isn't, we don't try to expand it when we're passing that on to the runner. We also have an increase in support in the rules exist configuration for CI/CD variables. So once you get to more complex, GitLab CI configuration, it can be very difficult to kind of maintain and scale that at a large scale. But by adding support for CI/CD variables within the rules exist keyword, you can now use variables for things like paths or file names, and that allows you to easily have a single source of truth by storing those frequently used variables somewhere, and then ensure consistent behavior across all of your pipelines and makes that configuration a lot easier to manage. So that's a really exciting update. And then finally, really big update, and maybe the largest one, it's hard to pick a favorite, but is the DAST API analyzer for on-demand DAST API scans. So Now we can use this DAST API analyzer for any on-demand DAST API scan. And in previous version, the analyzer used in these on-demand scans was the legacy version of our DAST analyzer. But our internal benchmarking shows that our DAST API analyzer finds more vulnerabilities, has a lower false positive rate than our legacy analyzer. So we're really excited to bring this to the on-demand scans. It also introduces new functionalities such as GraphQL scans, support for authentication tokens that might expire, scans using a collection from Postman or HAR files. So this is really, a fantastic update. And while we're, switching with this switch to the DAST API analyzer, some of that functionality is already available in the on-demand site profile. In addition to using an open API specification in the site profile to define the API tests, you can now also use a Postman collection or a HAR file to make sure that your test gets, all of the API coverage that you expect and manage that a lot easier. And also added basic authentication as another option for on-demand API scans. Previously we were using token-based only in the authorization header, but now you can use basic auth as well. And next up will be work on adding GraphQL support to those on-demand API scans. And so look for a lot more improvements in the next few releases as we incorporate more of this advanced functionality of the DAST API analyzer into the on-demand DAST scans. And of course, as always, this is only a handful of the updates from GitLab 15.6. Fantastic improvements both to managing complex CI, CD pipelines, as well as this huge step forward with DAST, dynamic application scanning. And so if you want to learn more about GitLab 15.6 and read about all of the fantastic improvements in it, you of course go to the GitLab blog and look for the blog post that has every one of the improvements and changes listed right there. And now I'm really excited to dive into GitLab's newly announced, security and governance features with none other than Hillary Benson, who has previously joined the lab as a guest a few times and has a lot to tell us about this new product announcement. Hillary, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Brendan. I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, always glad to have you on. Now, Hillary, could you tell our listeners a little bit about, security and governance? What is it and why does it matter? And how is GitLab looking at this space?
Yeah, of course. So inherently, there's usually quite a lot of complexity involved in making sure that you have the right approach, the right processes, and the right tooling in place to build secure software that can continuously meet requirements, both for your organization's internal security policies, as well as any regulatory requirements that you might need to comply with. So the concepts of security and governance within GitLab are all about reducing that complexity. So we're very laser focused on enabling our users with a platform that's outfitted to help you implement a comprehensive DevSecOps program that not only lets you enable or lets you find and fix security issues early in the development process, but also provides the native capabilities to help you manage your global security risk with built-in security policies and compliance frameworks and a system of checks across the entire development lifecycle to ensure that your software supply chain is as secure as possible. So our recent product announcement highlights a number of features, most of which are available now in the product today, that can provide concrete solutions for users in each of those areas.
Yeah, that's really exciting, and I know I've been looking at this announcement. There's a lot of different exciting updates that are part of it. But what are some of the specific changes or updates, and what are you most excited about when it comes to this kind of broad category?
Yeah, there's really a lot of great stuff that's available today. So I think from our most recent announcement, the features broadly fall into three buckets. There's software supply chain security, finding and fixing vulnerabilities, and compliance. So in the first bucket, in software supply chain security, I think often the first thing that comes to mind for most people when they think of supply chain security is managing dependencies and building that basic software bill of materials. So earlier this year, we made it easier for GitLab users to generate and export software bill of materials, or SBOM, for their projects using native data from GitLab. And so as we continue to evolve our SBOM capabilities, we're looking to provide users with a way to leverage third-party tools that they might be using to do the same thing. And then I think another big aspect of supply chain security is in being able to prove the authenticity of any software artifacts that you're building. So today, the GitLab runner can produce a SLSA 2 compliant attestation for any artifacts that it produces. And then going forward, we'll look to have the runner automatically generate those attestations for every build. So it's a real seamless process. So those are sort of the big things going on in the supply chain security bucket. We have a lot of other stuff going on there as well, but these are kind of the highlights. In that second category of finding and fixing vulnerabilities, we've delivered a number of really important improvements recently. There's really too many to highlight individually, but generally speaking, we've been very focused on reducing exposure to false positives, improving our rule sets, streamlining user experience. So there's a lot going on there. There is one feature I want to highlight specifically. Earlier this year, we introduced what we're calling integrated security training into our developer workflow. A very common problem that organizations face is actually enabling their development teams to take action to resolve security findings. There's a number of challenges that are sort of baked into that, but part of the challenge comes down to very pointed security education for developers. So the idea behind integrated security training is to provide developers with the information that they need to understand the risk behind a vulnerability, what causes it, and how to fix it at exactly the moment that it's most relevant, which is when they've actually introduced some bit of insecure code into an MR that they're working on. So this pulls security education that is often kind of high level and sort of esoteric for folks and makes it very actionable and relevant for developers by putting it in the context of their day-to-day work. And then finally, the last bucket of updates I want to touch on are around our compliance offerings. So this is another major area of ongoing focus for us, and there's really a laundry list of features to touch on here, from streaming audit events to enabling folks to require two-person approvals in merge requests based on certain criteria, the ability to set specific password requirements for your users. We also recently completed our FIPS 140-2 compliance effort. So there's been a lot going on here. And then going forward, we're very focused on making it easier to manage compliance at scale. So you'll see a lot of that coming. So for example, we have some work coming up on customizable roles and permissions that'll make it easier to scope who has access to what. So that's quite a lot that we've had going on, but those are the major highlights.
Yeah, no, that's a lot. And it's a large area, security and compliance, and it's one where I think I'm really excited to see us taking all these big steps forward and kind of looking at the full breadth of security and compliance. And that security education you touched on is really key. I know back when I was trying to develop software for the federal government, you'd have a lot of times where you get to the end of a cycle and have all of these security findings, and it's like none of the context is there, right? And so putting that in context really enables developers to learn and make a smarter assessment of maybe something is a false positive, or maybe we haven't thought through how something's going to work. Having that happen when you're in that context of the merge request that's making the changes is just so critical. Our DevSecOps survey this year showed that developers and lots of folks throughout the DevSecOps space are feeling more and more responsibility for security. And so hopefully this is a way we can help enable that. And then you also started with something there's been a lot of discourse about, in the past year and a half, 2 years, supply chain security. Is that discourse what's driving these changes, or what do you think about that when you look at the market?
Yeah, that's definitely a big part of it. So I think with kind of the wide scale supply chain attacks over the last couple of years, and the additional standards that folks are working on to try and get a grasp on how to address those attacks, I think organizations are very aware of their security postures and are prioritizing that. And then at the same time, we're seeing broader organizational ownership of security than was the case in the past, right? These days, development and operations teams are, owning significant pieces of the security puzzle as much as the security team is. And so for most people, security is already kind of right at the center of their software development lifecycle and their product strategy. And if it's not, it probably should be. So for GitLab, I think that means making DevOps look more and more like DevSecOps every day, right? And so one of the benefits I think of our single platform approach is that it really directly facilitates a lot of that evolution in a very natural way, because it's where these different groups are already working, and we're finding that's driving a lot of value for for our users, our customers, and partners. And in fact, in our annual DevSecOps survey this year, we found that, as you were touching on, actually, that security was the highest priority investment area for organizations. And nearly 57% of security professionals stated that their organizations have kind of already shifted security left, or they plan to this year. And so the DevSecOps philosophy is definitely going into practice, and folks are always looking for ways to make it easier.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned shifting left, something we've heard a lot as well. Is that still something that folks that may have a DevOps practice or are working on there? Is shifting left still something that's key to like the bigger picture of DevOps, do you think?
Definitely, I think so. Yeah, shifting left is a critical part of it. As organizations try to move to more of a DevSecOps model of developing software, bringing security testing earlier in the development lifecycle is always going to be a critical part of that process. And so that's why at GitLab, we're continually focused on reducing the friction associated with that process and trying to make it as easy as possible to test as early as possible.
Makes sense. Well, great. Well, Hillary, your insights are always so appreciated. It's been great having you on the lab again, and we can't wait to have you back.
Thanks so much, Brendan.
Yeah, thank you. And as always, if you want to learn even more about GitLab's updates to its security and compliance solution or the rest of the 15.6 release, head to GitLab's website, about.gitlab.com, or check out our latest blogs and press releases. And thanks so much again for watching today and joining us. You can find me on the internet at O'Leary Crew most places. If you have an idea for a future episode or want to discuss anything from today's episode in more detail, feel free to reach out. And again, the lab is produced monthly. So thanks again for joining us, and I'll see you next month in the lab. Happy holidays and stay safe.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, this is Mike Rothman. I'm back with another Techstrong TV interview. This time we are pleased to welcome Michael Ferrante, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of Teleport, here to talk to us a little bit about a recent study that they did, asking folks about access and kind of how they're protecting access and really making sure that the right folks get to the right stuff internally, especially as things continue to get a lot more complicated as we've got, DevOps and cloud native infrastructure and all sorts of and multiple devices and multiple locations and all this remote work. So, it's a pretty complicated world out there and getting folks to the right stuff continues to be a major priority for organizations, or at least it should be. If it's not, gosh, we should. But yeah, Mike, we were chatting a little bit before before we started, kind of the interview, and I don't want to say disturbing, but there was some stuff that was clearly surprising from the standpoint of the data that you guys kind of came up with. So first of all, welcome to the show. Welcome to Techstrong TV. Glad to have you.
Thanks for having me. This is I'm excited to be on.
Good. So tell us a little bit about, kind of the study and maybe, let's start with one of the top line, kind of results that you got there.
Yeah, well, I think, it is, these security surveys are always, they're always eye-opening. If you don't want, your children to sleep at night, you can either let them watch a scary movie or read a security survey. It is kind of disturbing. In fact, one of the headlines of the report, which is called "The State of Infrastructure Access and Security," if folks want to look it up, just Google it. This is the second year that we've done the report, and so we actually asked many of the same questions as we did last year, so that we could see how things have changed over time. I'm sure we'll get into that. But one of the questions that we asked last year and this year as well is, how confident are you that ex-employees can no longer access your infrastructure? And what do I mean by infrastructure? Well, infrastructure is its servers, its databases, its internal applications like CI/CD systems, monitoring dashboards, cloud accounts, right? Your AWS account. These are all writ large infrastructure resources. Kubernetes clusters is another one that's very popular with our customers. And so when an ex-employee leaves your organization, can they no longer access that Kubernetes cluster, that SSH server, that Windows box, that cloud account? And not surprisingly, because it's very consistently with last year, but concerningly, only a quarter of respondents said that they were fully confident that ex-employees could no longer access company infrastructure. So, Michael gets fired as chief marketing officer at Teleport, and, can Michael no longer access Teleport infrastructure? In my case, the answer is yes. Hopefully I won't get fired, but we actually have a unified way of removing all access, but many companies don't. Folks work from home. And so you can imagine a situation in which, Michael, DevOps engineer, gets laid off through no fault of his own, through, just kind of that seems to be what's happening these days. And his company says, you know what, Michael, just keep your laptop. Great. Okay. So Michael no longer works at the company. His Okta is deprovisioned. But on that laptop, Michael still has an SSH key, right? That was registered in a production environment. And so though Michael no longer works at the company, Michael is still able to access those production systems.
That's right.
It's the siloed nature of how access is managed for infrastructure that creates a big problem.
Yeah. And I think that really highlights a lot of the challenge of a lot of this new modern infrastructure that we have. You kind of mentioned, you're deprovisioned from Okta, but again, if you don't lock down the federation part of it in Salesforce or Workday, right, you're really locked out. So you just have a lot of different moving pieces relative to, again, modern infrastructure that makes access and really restricting access on that front complicated. So there another kind of top line conclusion that you guys found, especially compared to last year, right? Was that how it changes from year to year is always interesting to me.
Yeah, one of the things that we looked into this year was kind of the increasing complexity around infrastructure. And when we talk about access, often we think about, the example that I just gave, it's Michael that's accessing an infrastructure resource. But in a data center, the vast majority of communication between various systems is what we call machine communication, machine to machine. It's not, a developer logging into a system. It's a microservice that I've written or a CI/CD pipeline that I've deployed that is speaking to other resources. And because of supply chain attacks and various security vulnerabilities, that's actually a huge problem. And we ask people, how many machines, infrastructure resources, et cetera, do you typically have in your environment compared to people? And machines outnumber humans 100 to 1 in the average organization. And I think folks are not thinking about access policy for their services that are being written the way that they're thinking about it for people. Now, clearly, when only 25% of organizations are fully confident that ex-employees can no longer access infrastructure, we have some ways to go when it comes to managing policy for humans. But I don't even think we're there yet when it comes to the policy that's attached to these machine users.
I can tell you we're not. Right. I can tell you we're not, because, again, I've spent, more time than I care to admit in the trenches of, kind of cloud type stuff. And it's incredibly complicated. Right. So locking down a lot of those resources, it's not just, oh, hey, kind of this server gets to access these, specific resources. Right. You have to really think about it from an entitlement standpoint. And again, not just who can access it. Right. But what can it do? Right. Or what can that specific resource do within the environment, to be a little bit more grammatically correct on that front. Yeah. I spent some time as a CMO too. So, kind of the words, I try to get the words as precise as I can on a given time. But again, and then we start thinking about, kind of how do we lock down a lot of the APIs that are being used to access a lot of these services. And, you talk about cloud and cloud accounts is really kind of a new version of this infrastructure that we have. Well, everything we can do, in one of these cloud consoles can be accessed via APIs, right? And API keys. So how are we, kind of doing all that? So not surprising at all to me that, again, we're pretty crappy at locking down the users, but we're just awful at, kind of a lot of the resources because we don't think about it that way, right? Kind of the IAM team within any specific enterprise tends to focus on provisioning the users and federating their identities to where it is they need to be. They don't think about, kind of what components are within these specific tech stacks that, kind of comprise a lot of new modern applications. Now, we'll go off a little menu here, right? But the marketing machinery of the security industry, continues to strike again, right? And you hear a lot of these problems, Michael, and the first thing that comes to a lot of folks' mind is, hey, I read somewhere or I saw somebody said zero trust is the answer to that, right? So we just embrace zero trust, right? On that front, all these problems go away. Now I'm going to try to reserve my initial biases about that before I give you a chance, to react to that specific statement. But I mean, again, a lot of folks will just kind of throw out a term, a marketing term when you're trying to, deal with specific, kind of very tangible issues. So how do you kind of deal with this mismatch of, somebody who's been conditioned to think that, hey, I just buy a zero trust thing and all these problems go away, and the reality of those different issues that you kind of decompose in the report?
Yeah. Great question. I mean, it's interesting that, if you want to buy a zero trust solution, you just Google it and who shows up. It's all of the networking vendors. Well, what is zero trust? Zero trust says the network no longer matters. Do you really think that your networking provider is the one who's going to bring you to the promised land of zero trust? I don't think so. And I think that's where some of the marketing message, it just clouds it. What do we actually mean by zero trust? At Teleport, what we mean by zero trust is simply that, Michael, it doesn't matter that he works at Teleport. When he's trying to log into any system, a server, a database, an application, he's going to be authenticated and authorized based on policy. That's what zero trust is. Every single connection gets authenticated and authorized regardless of the network.
Yeah. The machine or human, right? Machine or human. That's right.
Unified policy for every single connection. That's what zero trust is. The problem with zero trust is, I think folks get that. You need what's typically called an identity-aware access proxy to do that. Basically, funnel all of your traffic through a system that provides the authentication and authorization mechanism. That makes sense. So it's like, okay, well, how do I do that? There's some technical challenges around building your identity native proxy. That's one of the major components of the Teleport platform, which is why people come to us. But there are other ways to do it, and we encourage that as well, because we'd rather have a secure internet than a less secure internet.
Right.
The other piece, though, is how do you attest to identity? Right. So if I'm saying this is an identity aware proxy, how is identity instantiated or proven rather? One of the things that the survey reports, and this is like truly, I believe in today, 2022, truly catastrophic. The vast majority of organizations are still using passwords and other secrets like SSH keys, for instance, to authorize people to access infrastructure resources. And these things can be stolen, right? So if I steal your username and password, then I can log into that database and drop tables as if I were you. Am I you? No. But because I have these credentials that are static in nature, I can log in. We believe that zero trust requires a move away from static credentials and to embrace identity based on phishing-proof forms of authentication, such as biometrics and multi-factor authentication. When you combine what we call a secretless approach with a true zero trust identity native access proxy, magic starts to happen, because all of a sudden the happy path is the secure path. I'm an engineer. I come in the morning. I open my MacBook Pro and I tap my finger. Now it knows that it's Michael. There's proof of presence. There's proof of identity. I have an access policy that defines what Michael should be able to access. And every time I try to go to a server, a database, an application, my identity is being verified. It becomes seamless, another marketing term, right? It becomes transparent, but there's a complete audit log of it. and I don't have to continue to log into all of these different servers using passwords and keys. I can simply use my identity.
So let's talk a little bit about coverage, right? Because you know when you map out a vision like that, it's like, wow, that sounds great. How do I go and do that? And then you realize, oh, I have about 200 different legacy applications that I have to deal with, right? I've got a whole mess of SaaS kind of platforms and applications I'm dealing with, some of which I don't even know about, right? Because we all know this business IT stuff happens and they go around kind of central IT because they're not relevant enough. So I guess in one of the constraints, and this isn't an excuse, right? But one of the kind of responses I always hear from folks, well, until we get to everything, we really get to nothing, and there's still the weak link. So, I mean, how do we kind of start to stage out and really migrate towards this idea of seamless, transparent, secure, and verified access to a lot of these core resources, knowing that it's going to be a bit of a journey, right? But not, kind of wanting to continue to sacrifice security on the stuff that, would plug into it. So what's the general, approach and recommendation for how we start to get there?
Yeah, typically, the way we see it with our customers is we kind of started out as we're very engineering heavy organization. The engineers and the founders of Teleport worked at large scale cloud computing providers, and kind of their job was building the systems that we all rely on every day. And they took those lessons and they said, okay, how can we create a generalizable solution to big problems that we faced as engineers at these hyperscalers? And that's where Teleport came from. So our customers tend to be very, very technical teams within organizations that are pushing the envelope for what IT can provide. So, when you are running massive scale Kubernetes clusters, right, and your IT has what's called a PAM solution, privileged access management solution, like, okay, everything has to go through a PAM. Well, these teams are like, okay, I hear what you're saying, and I understand the implication of that. You want audit, you want to be able to explicitly authorize, you want to be able to implement zero standing privilege. Like, I get all of that, but these solutions do not do that for Kubernetes. And here is a solution, Teleport, that allows us to define who can access our Kubernetes clusters, provides real-time audit, provides zero standing privilege, privilege escalation, just-in-time access. Is this sufficient? And IT will look at it and be like, yeah, absolutely. And so they'll start there. And then our experience for managing access to Linux and Windows servers tends to be more dev friendly than traditional PAM solutions. So they'll accrue those use cases, and then it's database access, and it is application access. Teleport is a class of service that we're seeing a lot more of, where developer experience is really the part of the core value of the platform. We provide the security, lawyers would say not guarantees. We provide the security that you would expect from a traditional security vendor, but with an experience that developers love. Again, so the happy path is the secure path. And it's a groundswell. People hear about it. And this is just the nature of technology innovation. It's you have a market leader, and then they become stated, and then people start to get frustrated by it, and then an incumbent comes, and we're just in that phase right now. And so I would say, look, you always need to match these business business expenses with business value. And because all companies now are software companies, you really need to keep your engineers happy and productive. And so rather than trying to solve, 1,000 different use cases across your entire organization for potentially limited results, focus on where you're spending the most money on talent, which typically is in your engineering organization, and also the highest value business applications that you're developing. So, who's going to be building your AI system, right? That's going to enable you to compete over the next decade. Well, it's probably some very highly paid engineers writing some highly specialized microservices to manage it. Right. Focus there, and then spread out.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good and I guess my counsel to most folks is don't try to boil the ocean. Right. Again, whether you start in developers, and I think that's a great place to start. I think there's a lot of pretty important information in SaaS environments that, kind of would be another, kind of decent place to, kind of start restricting access and managing access along those lines, along, kind of the collaboration environment that, kind of we see day in and day out, our Office 365s and our Teams and our, kind of Slacks and a variety of those. So there are just a ton of applications that you can get going where you've got very sensitive information flowing in and out. And I think it does warrant, taking a look at what can I do to ensure that we're not impacting and making more complicated than we need to, right? The user experience, yet we're, kind of ensuring that we protect that. And I like that concept that, kind of when the easy path is the secure path, that tends to be, when good things happen. So, Michael, really appreciate your time on the show today. How do we get in touch with Teleport if our folks want to, learn a little bit more about the survey or more about the company? Why don't you tell us how we can get in touch with you guys?
Yeah, just drop in at goteleport.com. And we can happy to answer any questions you have. You can find the survey there. You can learn more about the Teleport solution, talk to one of our solution architects, figure out how we can help you. We'd love to talk to folks.
Well, that's fantastic. So, Michael Ferrante, thank you so much for your time and appearing here with us on Techstrong TV. And we'll head back to the studio for our next show.
Thank you, Mike.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, we're back here at the Qualys QSC Conference 2022. We're at the Venetian in Las Vegas. And our next guest, I'm really happy it's the first time I've ever interviewed him, Jonathan Tull. Jonathan is the CISO of Qualys. And hey, Jonathan, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, Jonathan, you've been CISO about a year over at Qualys.
That's right.
But if you don't mind, share with the audience a little bit of your background.
Sure. Yeah, I've been in, information technology and intelligence for quite a long time. I was a lieutenant commander in the Navy, did intel work there. So there's a lot of application from physical, national intelligence to cybersecurity. From there, I was with the state of Colorado as a CISO and worked in the security department for 12 years. Spent a good run at Microsoft, where I ran the global incident response team. So 300 incidents around the globe, visited 18 countries with teams of reverse malware, reverse engineers, incident responders, infrastructure specialists. A lot of ransomware attacks that we would go and help large enterprises recover from. And then I've landed at Qualys as CISO. This is my actual second stint as CISO at Qualys. So I had a brief stint about 6 years ago.
Really? I thought it sounded familiar. It's funny. As I told you, I was in the security space for a long time. The security company I co-founded called Still Secure was based out of Boulder. Oh. And we had State of Colorado as a customer back then. At the time, this is going back 2005 to 2007 timeframe.
Yeah.
They were winning a lot of awards there because they really, the state of Colorado had a great, we called it InfoSec, not cyber then, right?
Oh, yeah. No,
they had a great InfoSec department and program there.
Yeah, I ran a program there called Secure Colorado, really to centralize security. Ended up working a lot at the time with a gentleman named John Strufert, who was there with the Department of Homeland Security around the continuous diagnostic and monitoring program. And we really wanted to take what was really what I thought a best practice at the federal level and adopt kind of our state version. Mm-hmm. And then also, at the time we were maybe even before, all of the election kind of issues popped up, we were very focused even back then on helping our Secretary of State and our counties secure our election systems. Before it was, I guess, fashionable and a political
timely,
topic.
Right. How timely is we're here the day after election day, right? Though we we haven't heard yet of any kind of craziness, but, fodder for another conversation. We'll have you on Techstrong TV. But unfortunately, the drop-off a lot of times from the federal level of like vulnerability management and cyber in general to state and local sometimes can be drastic, right?
Yeah.
It's very choppy state to state. But I wanted to talk to you more about going on here at the QSC.
Yeah.
Our audience sitting at home saying, well, it sounds like a Qualys user conference. I know it is. It is. We're not going to say it's not. But I've been going to QSCs, I think, since Philippe started them years and years ago. And I've always found them a great industry event, a great forum to speak with peers, to talk about relevant topics. It's not just all Qualys product all the time.
Yep.
Interested in your take on that.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think while it is, obviously branded as a Qualys security conference, I mean, there's CISOs here from, government agencies, healthcare, manufacturing, financial services. There's security engineers that are actually implementing and working in different programs. And, if you look at the new products that we've introduced over the last couple of years, it's not just vulnerability management anymore, right? It's web app security, web app pen testing, it's patching and patch management, it's cyber asset inventory. And so, all of these, the industry's been struggling with, for forever, right? Since the beginning. And so, I think it's a lot more about the dialogue and learning best practices from peers and, how do we do this well? How do we move more efficiently? To a certain extent, we're all constrained with budgets and the macroeconomic conditions. So there's a lot of talk about, automation and how do we optimize the resources and help us focus on the most important things. And I think that's where a lot of the value comes from this conference.
Yep. And obviously over the last year it was in person, but it was hybrid.
Yep.
Virtual and in person. I believe the year before it was virtual only.
Yep.
This year it's not virtual at all. It's all in person. And one of the nice things, I don't know if our audience can see, because it's not like this is not a fake backdrop.
Yeah.
It's real, right? There are people here and they're talking to each other.
Right.
And we don't get that in the virtual space. So to me, this is a huge plus why you want to come down, meet with people, and really talk some of these topics.
Agree.
Now, Jonathan, 2022, like most years in security, has had its challenges.
Yep, it has.
Right? We've had some doozies. Ransomware is crazy.
Well,
everyone talks about software supply chain and SBOM this and SBOM that. For you, what are the big stories for this year around cyber?
Yeah, and I think obviously open source software has gotten a harder look, right? We've had some vulnerabilities that have come out, and it doesn't mean anyone's not using open source software. It just means we're now having to really consider how is it supported, how do we keep track of it. It goes back to inventory, but again, inventory's been hard, for a lot of companies. And I think, with the presidential executive order and, SBOM and a bill of materials is a big topic. And it's hard to get into it, but it is a very critical aspect for our industry. And for me, as a CISO of a software supply chain company, there's a lot of emphasis from our customers that I do have full control over my supply chain. And that's a very complicated task, and we're working very hard on it. I know a lot of my other peers are working very diligently on what does it mean to truly implement a supply chain security program and to deliver an SBOM that people can rely on and trust, right? That makes sense to them. So that's been a really big topic, and unfortunately, like you said, from the incident response standpoint, still 80-90% of the attacks that I see are ransomware related. Unfortunately, it's causing a lot of pain. I'm not sure I have anything more to share. I mean, it's the same traditional tactics and
I don't think it's a secret. I think what we're seeing out there is become almost just common meat and potatoes kind of things. Quickly on the issue of the open source, I think to a certain extent, open source has almost been a victim of its own success. I remember, and I'm sure you do too, I remember you say Mac was so much more secure than Windows.
Right.
Well, when Windows had 95% of the market and Mac had 5%, it wasn't as big a target.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is now, 75-25 or whatever. Mac certainly has more market share than it used to. And you see attacks on Macs now.
Absolutely.
Maybe not. Windows isn't what it was either. They're both, I think, much more secure than they were in the 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
But open source is everywhere. Something like, I forget if it's 98 or 99% of enterprises are using open source software within their...
Absolutely. I'd be shocked if anyone in the world of any size didn't have some component of open source, either a small library that's a dependency of some code, some Docker instance that was pulled down because it seemed easy to use, that was put up in some repo and shared out. And I think that's why the challenge of securing the supply chain is so difficult, right?
Yes,
you
it
have
is.
code that's openly shared, and a lot of developers share openly, right, and freely, and even whether they license it as open source or not, I mean, they're sharing their code, and sometimes the attackers know that, and they have techniques like type squatting, that will trick developers into downloading the malicious code.
The wrong containers.
Yeah.
You know what? I think that goes to fundamentally. So I started DevOps.com in 2013, 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the trends I was seeing then was the change in the way software was built. It wasn't just an engineer sitting and writing code from scratch.
Right.
In many ways, they were assembling it like a supply chain.
Exactly.
Like, building an application. And so when you have that, all of a sudden that software supply chain becomes a big deal. So that's certainly a huge vector. You mentioned the ransomware. As much as I hate it and I marvel at the organization of the bad guys, I don't know how you solve that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to solve it like policy related or through criminal sanctions. I mean, it's just too complicated. I mean, I think I applaud the people that are trying to bring those actors to justice, but there's a lot of political complications and people that are out of reach depending on what country they're operating from. And I think what we have to do is and a lot of companies are doing this now, saying, I'm going to have a ransomware threat reduction program, right? I think if you don't focus your energy, right, controls can slip. And so if we know ransomware is, probably the leading risk factor for a lot of us, we have to have a ransomware response program. We have to evaluate all of our controls against what ransomware would normally get in our environment, move laterally, and I think we just really have to focus on it. And you're starting to see a lot of programs that say, listen, I'm going to have a ransomware reduction program, and we're going to focus on all of the ransomware families, how they get in, how they spread. We're going to design controls around that. And I think it just takes that level of emphasis.
Really?
Now, enterprises can do it. I think it's much harder for a small business, right? And that's where a lot of the attacks are happening.
They are, and they're hit and run. They make their money and go. I realize you're the CISO at Qualys, not the product guy. But what you have an XDR and what is Qualys doing anything to help maybe the mid-market with ransomware?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've released our new EDR product and XDR, I think, are the top of really helping prevent ransomware attacks executing on an endpoint or detecting them quickly. And then on the VMDR side, which has, been a mainstay, but I think the thing is now, using threat intelligence, we say these are the ransomware families, these are the specific vulnerabilities that they're leveraging, patch those first and foremost, right? Let's make it easier. Don't try to, most failures of vulnerability programs, in my opinion, are treating everything equal, and you get 500,000 vulnerabilities and you send a report over to the IT team and they're like, oh my gosh, I hate you guys in security, right? Like, stop sending me this. When in reality, let's focus, right? There's 5 vulnerabilities that if we fix those, it'll reduce our risk of ransomware. So I think it's, helping people prioritize. And so I think
Absolutely.
that's a big push too.
And that's always been.
Yeah.
Hey, just one more area I want to cover with you, if it's okay. 2023, we're 2 months out from the new year. I'm sure as we said, ransomware is not going away. Software supply chain, it's going to continue being a big thing.
Yeah.
But security is as big a priority as it's ever been,
Yeah.
and everyone I speak to. What do you think for 2023 are other areas that we maybe haven't mentioned yet that we should be looking into or be cognizant of?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I don't think the industry has fully matured with the automation and the automated response as much as we had hoped. I think there was great promise in SOAR and man, this is going to limit the need and, we won't have to hire as many people. And honestly, I just don't see that that's played out for the industry. So I think we are experiencing some macroeconomic conditions, maybe not in cyber, but there's some pressure to say, how do we do more with fewer resources?
Yep.
And usually that leads to innovations in automation, I would hope. And then I think on the attack side, while we have the continued attacks that we have, I am nervous about the just enormous growth of non-traditional computing devices and how we handle those. And I think, luckily we haven't seen we've had a few, Colonial Pipeline, a few others where we've had like OT system impacts, but the more that we have embedded computing and like very physical oriented devices that have true life safety risk, I think there's going to be an emphasis. There's going to be some issue that's going to transpire that's going to really call attention to a need to better regulate, look for some solutions in that space, other than what we have right now, which is unfortunately kind of isolate and let's hope nothing happens, is where we're at as an industry.
We're talking about IoT devices, and there's going to be 55 billion of them in the next couple of years. It's funny, we have a virtual event next week called DevOps Experience, and one of the tracks is called DevOps of Things.
Okay, yeah.
Because I think from a security point of view, we were in stage one of, what the heck's out there?
Right, yeah, right.
Let's discover what's connected. Oh, those devices, they don't have a lot of headroom. They can't be patched.
Right.
They're simple on, off.
Yeah.
But the nature of those devices are changing. As you mentioned, they're pacemakers in people's hearts. They're other medical devices that are implanted. They're sensitive manufacturing, but they're sophisticated devices. They're not the old SCADA on-off
switch. Yeah, exactly.
And they have real software on there, and they're upgradable.
Yeah.
They've got to be securable too, and I think that's a challenge. And it's not just the security industry's challenge. The maker of those devices,
manufacturers,
right?
Yeah. And I know they're putting a lot of work into it. I mean, listen, I applaud, like the Honeywells and many of these corporations.
We were just at Honeywell last.
Yeah, they're putting a lot of effort, and I think that's absolutely, kind of the right direction. And unfortunately, it's so easy to get into software development and manufacture devices, and Microsoft and AWS provide SDKs to make it easy for developers to create these smart devices. But with that ubiquitous nature, my concern is, are we back to the point where, oh my gosh, like every C code has buffer overflows all over, right? Thank goodness, we've moved to some more secure languages that have garbage collection and do a better job on that.
There's so much out there, man.
There's so much out there still, right?
A lot of it's legacy.
Exactly. Exactly.
November 16th, DevOps Experience. We actually have a few tracks right on that point.
Well,
and we're going to talk about it again and predict in January. Anyway, hey, first of all, thank you. This is the first time we've interviewed you as CISO here at Qualys, but hopefully it's not the last.
Yeah.
We invite you on. We do Techstrong TV 3 days a week, right? We always have you on here. Thank you for talking with us. It's a great show here at QSC 2022. And good luck.
Thank you.
All right.
Time.
Thank you. Hey, we're going to take a break here in Vegas, and we'll be back with QSC in just a minute. Just a minute.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, we're back here live at the Venetian for Qualis' QSC 2022. It's always one of my favorite events to do because you get to meet real security people, and not just people who I'm interviewing, but even if you look behind us, there are people standing around. You know what? We missed this when we were all working from home. You can't do this virtually. So it's nice. It's nice to be back. It's nice to hear security people talking. Speaking of security, let me introduce you to my next guest. I'm going to put on my glasses so I don't mess this up. It's Delane Miley?
That's correct.
Okay. And Delane is with Mercury Financial. And before we get into the great presentation she's doing in her case study, I'm going to ask Delane to tell us a little bit about herself and Mercury Financial.
Sure. So my name is Delane Miley. I'm a senior cloud security engineer with Mercury. I've been in the security industry, I guess, just a little over 5 years now. And I've been at Mercury for about 3. So Mercury Financial is a fintech company. We really focused on being an inclusive fintech company. That is our goal. So we were founded in 2013, and our whole goal is about helping everyday Americans build better credit so they can have a better life.
That's fantastic. And you know what, in case anyone's interested, website for Mercury
Yes,
Financial?
mercuryfinancial.com. We are based out of Austin, Texas. We also have an office in Delaware as well.
Beautiful. Austin's a great town.
Love it.
So that's interesting. And you know what, fintechs are such a hotbed of innovation.
Absolutely.
There's some great stuff coming out of here. Do you mind if I ask you a couple personal questions?
Sure.
Not too personal. So, senior cloud security engineer, how did you get into this?
Kind of by accident. I mean, I grew up in a generation that, we were just kind of around tech forever. It never really was something I kind of thought I could make a career until I kind of stumbled upon it in college and found out that security was a thing. It was something that I could make a career, and it was a way that I found that I could make a hobby into an actual profession, which was very exciting. And it's very much worked out because when you're passionate about something, it just makes it easier to do your job every day. And I love that it's such an ever-changing industry. There's always something new to learn. There's always something new to discover, and I love it.
You're preaching to the choir. I mean, I've been in security. I'm ashamed to tell you how old I am, but I've been in security about more than 25 years. Mm-hmm. And like you, got into it quite by accident. And they didn't have it in college when I went to college, but did get into security. One of the most common questions I get, more from my kids and their friends, not my kids, but their friends. They've taken security classes in college. They're interested in a career in cyber. Where do you start? How do you can't get that first job because every first job wants you to have experience. Well, I have no experience, but I did take some classes. Advice for everyone out here. How'd you get in?
It's tough. I will say I was just having a conversation with a friend about this the other day. And it is hard because it's, there's so many jobs that, and I could get on a whole soapbox about this because I think it is kind of a problem with the industry of expecting too much experience from entry-level folks right now, especially when so much of it is not in a formal setting. My degree was management information systems with a focus in security, but it wasn't, a bachelor's in cybersecurity. That's just, right. There's more of those now, but it's still not super common. And so really it's just a matter of poking around at everything you can, find something you enjoy. I mean, for me, it was building a home media server on a Raspberry Pi because I was bored and it looked like a fun tool, and from that I realized I was learning more about command line stuff, and from, then you can apply that to all different kinds of tools. And so I think it's really just find something you're interested in and just start poking around in it, really, and just find something that you can have fun with, whether that's, some of the websites was like Hack This Box or things like that are just out there for people to use. Yep. And from there, I think it's a matter of just applying everywhere you can and find a culture that you work with. That was, I got lucky with that at Mercury, that, a lot of our hiring is much more about, can you work with our team? As long as you are an intelligent individual, we can teach you what you need to know, but do you work well enough with us that we can teach you that?
And
so be teachable. That's a key right there too.
You know what, coachable.
Yeah.
And that's true. It's true in security. It's true in tech. It's true in life, right? Being coachable is a huge thing. You know, the nice thing about working in a fintech like Mercury Financial is you don't have a lot of legacy, old stuff. There's a lot that, you know, they're kind of born in the cloud to a certain degree. So you get to work, not in a green field, but in a newer environment where you can take advantage of, you know, some of the newer technologies that you have available to you. You're speaking here at QSC, and I want to get this right, so I'm putting on my glasses. Harnessing self-service and risk prioritization to drive compliance and remediation efficiency. So look, I founded a company that came out with a vulnerability manager in 2003.
Okay.
We've been fighting this fight.
Oh, yeah.
Philippe Courteau, the founder of Qualys, was a contemporary of mine. He was fighting this fight. We've been fighting it as an industry, right? The ability not only to find a vulnerability, but to patch it. The ability to automate patching. I keep thinking this is the year, right, where we're really going to automate it. You know, compliance kind of really came on in like maybe 2005, 2007, where we started doing compliance instead of security in many cases. Now it's kind of found its equilibrium, I think. But talk to me. What do you know, in your talk, what are you going to talk about? Maybe some best practices, some good things. Share it with our audience. No secrets.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. So, well, you talk about us being a fintech, and so we were founded in 2013. You know, we're just now coming up on the 10-year mark, but even so, it's weird to say that a company that's less than 10 years old could have legacy systems, but everyone has exactly
debt.
Like 10 years of tech is a lifetime compared to most industries. But even with that, our entire focus has been AWS. You know, so we're cloud native, and that has been a huge win for us. In so many ways, and a lot of that is with looking at things like vulnerabilities and risk. And I think you make a good point of, going from patching to compliance to and how they work together. So my background, I started my career as a consultant at PwC. So I have a little bit more of that kind of, GRC-esque mindset when looking at this. And so that's kind of what I want to really hit on. That's kind of the plan with really the talk, is really looking at how can we take this raw data that's coming out of Qualys, how can we take the numbers on the patches that we've got and the vulnerabilities and what we're doing with that, and then how do you apply a risk lens to that to really decide, okay, where do I focus here? Who is focusing on what? That's really important with the self-service part of things. We have, I believe I counted 6 different teams that are in Qualys for different purposes on, most of them a daily basis. And so being able to really tailor, the different parts of the tool and different, reports and such to those different teams is huge. But then it's a matter of, you've got all this data, what do you do with it? And being able to contextualize it partially for a remediation plan. So okay, what is more important to me? What is what should I patch first? But then also taking that to an executive level and saying, this is what our raw tech looks like, and then this is how that translates to risk and to business decisions that need to be made.
So that's another that you provide in security, right? I, for instance, at RSA conference one year, I once was on a panel of what metrics do we show the exec team, the C-level and the board level, and there was someone on the panel who flat out said, well, you got to dumb it down, right? and that kind of is really funny when you think about it, right? But you don't have to dumb it down, but how do we translate security speak to business speak? And when should we do? Because I'm also of the opinion that sometimes security people have to learn a little business speak, right?
It goes both ways.
Absolutely. It's a two-way street. So what advice do you have for people?
Oh gosh. Okay. So I think this could go into another potential soapbox of data visualization, which is another love of mine. And part of the reason I say that is because I think visualizing your data and visualizing things like risk or risk scores within vulnerabilities, for example, is kind of an easy way to translate information. If someone, just seeing numbers on a page, okay, what does that mean? But then if you can, visualize it in a way that makes sense, like all the Qualys dashboards that are offered. But the reason I say that, shout out Dr. Tripp from Baylor. I took a data visualization class, and he started class by saying, data visualization could have changed the outcome of the Challenger explosion, and here is why. And that has stuck with me. And so
That's powerful.
It's amazing. And so I kind of take that approach to things when I'm trying to think of how can I translate something. Because translating things in words from business to tech, sometimes even the same words mean different things depending on which teams you're talking to. But if you can display it in a way that is easy to see and easy to understand, that goes such a long way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You mentioned, and look, I'm not an expert on the Qualys product, but I know my way around it pretty well from being in the industry. One of the things they have with their dashboards is different views for who you are within an industry. You want to be you're a manager, you're a direct, a hire, you're a practitioner. They give you views that are relevant to you. How do you? Now, of course, it's all about how you dial in the dials, right? In your position, right? You're at that border, right? Where the translation's happening. Do you struggle with it? Is it something you kind of got down at this point?
I like to think I do, but there's always room for improvement. And I think it's something that kind of comes with practice and understanding your environment, because it's also different kind of depending on who you're talking to. I mean, that was something I worked with in, the consulting space, is you're dealing with a different client sometimes every week. And so you have to learn how to translate that to the people that you're talking to for them to understand. I've been at Mercury long enough now, it's a little easier because I know, what our board and what our executives can do it, expect. So it's kind of a little easier to translate that and knowing their understanding of the tech that we're, describing. But I don't think it's an easy task at all. I think it's something that requires constant, refinement.
Yeah. And then, in your line of business, you have another constituency to please, and that's auditors.
Yes.
Right? And that's a whole different language. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's audits, or we're finishing up our PCI audit right now. So we are right in the middle of that. I led our PCI audit for a couple of years, so I'm very familiar with that realm. And that's another translation, because it's, okay, you're taking something and showing it to executives to explain, how they can make business decisions on it. But then you have to take that same data set and show it to your auditor and explain to them, yes, of course, your auditor should know the tool and should know, the
you would hope.
Basics. Yes, should. But, with that, you need to still explain to them how it works within your environment. And that's another thing that we use Qualys for every year is, it's for the PCI scans, that's huge for us, having to, display that, but then also, having the data to show, this is how we're actually using this in our vulnerability management program.
Excellent. So, look, we're not here to do a commercial necessarily for Qualys, but so it sounds like Qualys has given you the ability, though, to really pivot. No pivot tables. I'm staying away from that. But to pivot the views and slice the information to the audience that you need to present to.
Listen, if you want to talk pivot tables, then we're in Excel, and that's completely my love language. So we can get there.
Yeah,
no.
No, it's It's like garlic to vampires to me. I can't do that.
Then we won't go there. But yeah, and it's interesting. I think when I kind of first really started getting into the industry, it was okay. Vulnerability scanners are that they're just a scanner, and so it's been interesting to see how, yes, Qualys, but also just the technologies overall have kind of evolved to, okay, now we're not just scanning. Now it's an active tracking, which that's going to be huge in PCI 4.0 is continuous compliance.
Yep.
And having an agent that's constantly keeping up with that, and to things like automating patching. So it's okay. We found the vulnerability. Well, now what do we do with that? And the fact that we're getting to a point. We just had a talk this morning with Robert Herjavec. I'm sure I butchered that, but
I know who you mean.
Yes.
They do too.
Yeah, he made a point about the technology is becoming more commoditized and that it's going to be more about context. And I think it's really true that you see that in just how many technologies there are out there. There's so much that you can automate, but it's still a question of, okay, but what do you do with that? And how do you use that to improve your security posture?
Absolutely. A lesson I learned, and it's as relevant today as it was then, was just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
Absolutely.
And, when it comes to automation especially, we really do. We need to say, can we? Yes. Should we? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And you got to be smart about that. But you're right. Technology is ubiquitous. Vulnerability scanning, quite frankly. I come from a world where we used to have to convince people to scan once a year.
Oh my gosh.
And it was only post, already deployed infrastructure, not like the idea of scanning your apps before you do, unheard of. But, so we've come so long. But we still struggle with the automation. And look, I started DevOps.com about 8 years ago, and that was one of the reasons. I felt it would be great for security, but I also knew that DevOps brought this whole idea of continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous everything. And security had to get with that program.
Absolutely.
If we were going to keep up with, because things move too fast. You can't have point in time stuff. It just doesn't work.
Well, the automation gets tough too because it's you don't want to break anything. You don't want to break your business processes.
Absolutely.
But I think it's been nice to see, and I kind of an approach we tend to take on things is, okay, if I can automate the actual work, but I'm going to choose when to push that automation. So there still has to be kind of a person pushing the button.
Right. Much as in DevOps, there had to be a person doing deploy. Now, pushing a button to deploy was a lot easier than what we used to have to do.
Exactly.
And that's where I think we need to be in security as well.
Yeah.
Elaine, thank you so much for being with us today. I don't know if we mentioned mercuryfinancial.com was the website.
Correct.
Good luck on your presentation.
Thank
We're going
you
to
so
be watching and keep up. And you know what? 5 years in the industry, she did it, you can too. So for those of you out there, there's plenty of jobs in security. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be back in a moment here in Vegas.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Elizabeth Lawler, who is CEO for App Map, and we're going to have a conversation about developer productivity and observability. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Mike.
Developer productivity has been an issue as long as anybody can remember, but it seems like as of late, there's a lot more focus on it. From your perspective, what's driving that conversation?
Well, I think that this is a natural progression now that I think companies have finally gotten their arms around what they're trying to do with delivery, right? So if you think about the evolution of DevOps over the last decade, a lot of focus has been on, really the delivery of software into modern IT infrastructure. And so if you look at the theory of constraints, right, and you say, okay, what are we doing? Well, we can build our application, we can test it, essentially, we can release it into production really quickly. High performance organizations can do this in minutes. Where's the new constraint? And really, it's around what do we build? How do we build it? And unleashing the creativity of the developer. And I think that's really where it's shifting all of that attention to the new constraint that's the furthest left. It's the code editor.
And to that point, it seems like a lot of our investments in observability to help drive that are in the CI/CD platform, and we're kind of leaning it a little bit left, but we're not providing the developer themselves with much insight. So do we need to strike a balance between what the developer can observe and what the rest of the DevOps engineers can observe? And how do we get there?
Well, I think if you actually look at the types of performance and security issues, which are now becoming more prevalent in production environments, they actually stem from root causes that are in code design. So if you look at, for example, at the OWASP top 10 or the most recent leading CVEs, they're design in nature. They're things that you can only see when the code's running, but they stem from code quality issues, such as inversion of authentication and authorization, for example, as a bad design pattern for security. And so I think it's really interesting how, that being able to see runtime is not actually part of a typical developer experience when you write code, right? It's like writing the novel and expecting the director's cut of the movie to come out the other side and be perfect. And so, I think by bringing some of that information about code behavior, runtime, performance, dynamic security analysis into the developer's workflow where they're working inside the code editor, we can unleash a lot of creativity, which is sucking developer, time away into hunting down issues across the later stage SDLC products that you described earlier.
Mm-hmm. How smart can all of this get? Because a lot of times the developer, even when presented with something, doesn't always know exactly what they're looking at, and they may not even know what questions to ask. So how do we kind of surface that in a way that is, as some people say, the idiot tax is as low as possible?
I think that's a really great point. So, observability itself is almost like a data scientist's art, right? Like it's giant amounts of information from logging and tracing that you get to sift through to try and figure out how things are working. By scoping information literally to the line of code, you can bring the kind of, we like to think about it kind of the Google map problem, right? You don't want a map of every street in every city around the world. You just want a map from here to the next destination, which might be a 7-Eleven. So you really want to have just the information that's relevant to the code that's in progress, the code that's being worked on, and have all that observability scoped down in a really nice way and link to those lines of code with the, interactive dependency maps and trace views and sequence diagrams and things that people can interact with and look at in a scoped and localized way. And I think that's really how the developer experience for observability is a shift from what you think about as typically like the IT experience for observability, which needs to be very broad spectrum in nature.
Can we do this across teams of developers? Because one of the things that we've encountered, for example, with security is everybody might scan their code for vulnerabilities, but then by the time you load everything up in the build, all kinds of issues start to emerge. So how do we do that in a way that everybody can understand what their piece interacts with somebody else's piece and create some sort of suboptimal experience? And can we get in front of that?
Totally. If I lint my code and you don't lint yours, then our code is not linted, right? So, so it's definitely important to have, basically, the first line of defense is to fix errors when they're cheapest to fix, right? When they're being introduced or when they're being written. The second line of defense is to catch it at the CI, at the CI level of it, when you're basically running everyone's changes in a common staging environment or in test. So, AppMap itself works in both environments. One is a backstop, but then, shifted the furthest left because actually, that's where people are most inclined to make the changes. It's surprising how many things that are flagged actually make it into production based on, we'll say, like weighted decision making, right? You could have things that have been flagged as security issues or flagged as potential, potential issues you might want to have addressed, but they'll still make it into production if you're under a deadline. So you really want to catch it at the moment of creation. And to your point, there's an opportunity to use that data in a generative way to make more suggestions about how one might code better. And I think that's really just improving the curve, right? Bringing everybody up to having a natural method of coding that's more secure and more performant and helps them understand languages and frameworks they work with better.
Mm-hmm. How helpful can it get in this regard? Will it eventually surface and say, hey, we've noticed that this is the 5th time you've made the same mistake, and perhaps you might want to take this training class to get a little
we haven't gone there with the product yet. I think that, maybe some managers would probably pay extra for that. But we do make suggestions about things like common mistakes people make when writing queries where they loop, or common mistakes people make in accidentally logging out secret information, and where the information is actually, where the secret is created and where the information is logged out is 2 different places in the code. So, AppMap does serve a strongly educational purpose around how your code is, or how your code base is organized and how it works when it runs and how you should think about working within it. So I think that's really a really important key part of AppMap.
All right. And how automated can all this get? I mean, eventually, a lot of developers I know are kind of like, well, thanks for telling me, but could you just fix that for me? So can I close the loop on this? And what might that look like?
Yeah, I think that's definitely, we obviously provide pop-ups and show you exactly the line of code you need to change, but we haven't yet started writing it for you. I think that's where the power of this data can go, though, which is if you look at things like Copilot, right? It's generative. It will tell you how to write, parts of code very well, but it doesn't tell you how to assemble it together. And it doesn't tell you how to, how maybe your code will be interacting with an endpoint service or an API or necessarily the database. There's a missing piece of that data that could be used to make those types of code recommendations to help people stitch together the components of their application better. And that's something that we're certainly thinking about, how we could use it to be more generative.
And who leads the charge in kind of putting this kind of tool in place? Is it the developer or is it the DevOps engineer who's got a vested interest in maybe fixing all this stuff and they show up at the end of the holiday year and say, hey, look what I got you?
Yes, I think that's a great point. We actually have multimodal distribution of users, everyone from new devs to architects. They're often leading a charge around, maybe they're working on institutionalizing some of their own design philosophy through AppMap and the ability to enforce even custom design patterns in the coding environment, as well as security professionals who are looking to communicate better with the recipients of their recommendations, and SREs who are looking to try and figure out that last mile connection between an existing observability tool or platform they might have, like Datadog or Dynatrace, and making the code recommendation to the actual development team for a fix. And so we kind of play nicely with all of those tools. So I really think that any one of those individuals could bring us in. I think we're most often adopted by developers because they're in the IDE and we distribute through the VS Code and JetBrains marketplaces. So they're usually the first ones to see it.
All right. What's your best advice to folks then? What's that one thing you see development teams doing over and over again that just makes you shake your head and go, can't believe we're still having this conversation?
Oh my. I would say that the ability to preview how your software will behave for changes It is one of the most common things people spend their time chasing down rabbit holes, is unexpected behavioral changes. If you run that map in advance of even committing your code to a PR, you can pre-play for certain types of breaking changes through behavioral diffing. And I think that is an incredibly powerful tool to be able to optimize your code before you submit it to the rest of the process of code quality, like peer review and central testing and staging.
All right, cool. Hey, Elizabeth, thanks for being on the show and sharing your insights.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, guys, back to you in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Tom Gillis, who is Senior Vice President and General Manager for the Networking and Advanced Security Group at VMware. Tom, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Michael?
I'm well. You guys just launched this whole Project North Star initiative, so I was hoping you would kind of explain what that's all about, given the fact that we are seeing more convergence between networking and security these days. But everybody's got a North Star. Where's yours go?
Yeah, sure thing. So really our North Star is pointed around, stitching together the multi-cloud universe. And so what we see more and more is customers are saying, I've got, very large private cloud data centers with lots of workloads, but I've got, increasing number of public cloud workloads. Maybe I've got it on 2 different public clouds, maybe even 3 public clouds. And I want to pull this together in a single coherent system. And so Project North Star is designed to do exactly that. Project North Star is the policy and the security analytics hub that allows us to create one global set of policies, and then we can still customize them and localize them at your East Coast data center, your West Coast data center, your instances running on Amazon or instances running out on, say, Google, and pull all this together with a single pane of glass. So yeah, it's a big project for us, and it's one that customers have been waiting for quite a while, actually.
How is the relationship between networking and security people evolving these days? Because it seems like, to me at least, that more of the security operational functions are moving towards the networking guys, and the security guys are focusing more on policy, but maybe it's not that neat.
Well, let me put it this way. The big trend that we see in security is with the principles of zero trust, you have to assume the attackers are already in. They've already penetrated your network. So now the name of the game is, how do you stop them from moving laterally throughout your infrastructure and stealing all your data, or worse, sort of creating a ransomware situation? That lateral movement is very difficult to detect if you don't have, tight integration and cooperation between the network team and the security team. So it used to be, you could deploy a firewall, and a firewall would live in one place at the perimeter. Okay. And so the networking guys, all they had to do was provide routes that would allow you to plug the firewall in, and the security team could be completely separate and independent. But when we look at the distributed nature of these attacks, we really need to be able to put security, not just at the perimeter, you want to put security everywhere. So integrating security and networking together into one functional team, that's the future. And this is even more relevant when we talk about public clouds, where you don't have a physical box to put it in, right? So this is all distributed software that we need to work together to make sure that we're deploying in a sensible way.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the rise of multi-cloud computing, therefore, is forcing a lot of people to revisit these issues? Because we're not adding a lot of more security people. Heck, we can't even find enough networking people. So do we need to find a smarter way of going about doing all this?
Yeah, so I think there's a tail, and a dog, and I think that the dog here is the sort of shocking and steady increase in both frequency and severity of ransomware. I mean, ransomware is a giant problem. And the reason it's a giant problem is it's a really good business because most people pay the ransom. So you can expect that trend to only continue. We expect ransomware to just get worse, not better. And so as we think about how we're going to stop this ransomware, it comes back to identifying the lateral movement of attackers. The idea that you're going to keep all attackers out is naive. So assume that they're already in your network. How do you stop them from moving around? And that's where this distributed security becomes so important. Once you have deployed a distributed security architecture, you want that to work on every cloud. So multi-cloud is kind of second phase of this, if you will, right? Like let's think about an advanced security solution, and then let's put that everywhere our workloads are, which is private cloud, public cloud, et cetera.
We've been talking about micro-segmentation for a while now. What's the challenges that organizations have when it comes to implementing that and adopting it? Because you would think it might be a little more widespread than it is at the moment. So clearly there's work to be done.
Yeah. So micro-segmentation is something we came up with, almost a decade ago, like 8 years ago. And micro-segmentation stops what I call the obvious problem, right? So it's obvious that a web server in a development environment should not connect to a database in a production environment ever under any circumstances. So don't allow that to happen. So microsegmentation is about shutting down application pathways that shouldn't exist. And the challenge with it is you would ask the question, well, what application pathways should exist? And one of the things that's interesting is if you ask a developer, tell me what ports and protocols you need to have open for this application. You know what the answer is? All of them. Right? Because developers oftentimes don't know. That's not the way they're thinking. And frankly, it's not the way we want them to think. We want developers to focus on business logic, not worrying about what ports and protocols are being used. So we've spent, the better part of a decade building AI and ML capability that can analyze your existing brownfield applications and then automatically generate firewall rules to do the microsegmentation. So the tools are in place to do segmentation and do it at scale. And we do this for the largest customers in the world, right? So we're kind of way, way, way past the point of credibility on this. So the good news is, for those that haven't deployed microsegmentation, we can help you do that fast. That's the good news. Here's the bad news. The bad news is that attackers are assuming you have segmentation in place. And so what we're seeing happen is there's a significant rise in what the security guys call living off the land attacks, where an attacker will either steal a credential or they will compromise a protocol to move through legitimate application pathways that microsegmentation won't stop. So microsegmentation is a foundational capability. If you don't have it in place, you're making it super easy for the attackers to do an Equifax type of clean sweep of your data center, which is not something anybody wants. But it's not enough, because we have to be able to stop these inline attacks that are using legitimate pathways.
You talked about developers. What's your sense of the current state of DevSecOps? We've been trying to get better at application security, and sometimes I feel like application security winds up being a jump ball, because the networking people think the app people are doing it, and the app people think the security people are doing it, and then nobody does anything. So
yeah,
what do we need to do to kind of bridge that divide?
Yeah, well, what's interesting is, it's clearly the future. The world we're moving into, especially in a Kubernetes-based world, security doesn't come in a box anymore. Security is going to be code, right? And as is infrastructure, as is the connectivity, those pathways that I was talking about. All of that stuff is going to be described in software, predetermined, pre-calculated, and then when it's runtime, you push a button and say go. So that means no tickets to open, no waiting a month for the firewall team to update those firewall rules. Remember that? No waiting, a month to get a DNS entry or VIP from a load balancer, right? You just push a button and it works. That's the cloud operating model. But what's interesting to me is that, I think your point, many customers say, yeah, that's what we want. That's what I want. But they struggle to get there. And it's not that the tools aren't in place. What they struggle with is what I call the layer 8 problem, right? Which is humans, people. And probably the number one offender, or the biggest challenge you have to overcome, is the firewall team, because firewalls have been working incredibly well. Like these are very, very well engineered, very high performance. I used to build firewalls, right? These things run and run and run. They don't make mistakes. And so we've been relying on these things for decades. But the fundamental architecture and design of a traditional firewall, even if you pull it out of the box and make it a VM, it's a scale-up system that's designed to run at a perimeter. It's not designed to run everywhere. And as I said, like, the name of the game these days is you got to look everywhere. You can't just look at the perimeter and hope you're going to catch all the ransomware. So change is in the wind, change is in the air, change is hard. Smart, administrators, smart architects are getting in front of this, because this is clearly the future. But we as an industry got a ways to go. Yes.
Are we seeing a flattening of cybersecurity in the sense that we used to have a lot of different silos? There'd be endpoint security, there'd be the network guys with the firewalls, app guys, and cloud networking security folks. And if everything becomes code, can we just flatten that so it can all just be centrally managed?
Well, within security, you see a similar, kind of, you're moving from, let's call it centers of excellence, or you could call them silos. And you flip it 90 degrees and say, I need one cross-functional team that's going to look about how I make security as code for this application. And that's going to have everything to do with code integrity on the, sort of very, very upfront, all the way to hardening and securing the runtime. None of that stuff should be figured out after the fact. None of it, right? You should be, when you're building and checking in code, you're scanning it, looking for vulnerabilities. That's all automated. Likewise, when you're, turning up a new cluster and putting it in production, you should make sure that the crypto is in place, that the malware detection is in place, and that you're doing advanced API security, where we're looking at how APIs are used and making sure that they're not being abused with that legitimate application pathway that ransomware would take advantage of. So yes, the world is changing, but it's all moving in this direction that it has been for a while, right? Which is software and policy, but that does entail a cross-functional approach. You can't do that with the center of excellence model, right? The siloed model.
We hear a lot about all things AI these days. What's your sense of what's real about AI as it applies to security and network management versus what's on the more fanciful side of things?
Yeah, it's funny. I just gave a talk in another forum on exactly this topic. So what is the role of AI? AI is essential for any security solution. And, if you think about that east-west problem that I talked about, this is a great example. So the imperative of looking at lateral movement is not new. This is something security has known for, a decade or more. And I would argue this is like one of the main value propositions of a SIEM. So a SIEM will look at everything. It looks at all your NetFlow records and your syslogs and your, web logs, and kind of munches them all together and says, let's see if we can identify the lateral movement of an attacker. And most of the customers I talked to were like, these SIEM systems, like, if I didn't have to buy this, because of regulatory requirements, I wouldn't, because they're really, really expensive, and they're really, really noisy, and they're really, really hard to use. And I'm not really sure I'm getting, the value out of it that I should be. And so, and it's not that the algorithms in a SIEM are bad. SIEM is relying on sample data. So SIEM is going to rely on NetFlow. NetFlow will tell you server A talk to server B. Is that good? Is that bad? Should I worry about that? Right? It's not enough context to know, is that something we need to worry about? I feel a little bit like, you ever watch Game of Thrones?
Mm-hmm.
So when I watch Game of Thrones, I get to like season 3, someone gets killed. I'm like, is that a good guy, bad guy? Am I happy? Am I sad? What, like I don't know. It's too complicated. So NetFlow and sample data are the equivalent of the Game of Thrones problem, in that you need to have very, very high fidelity data to figure out friend from foe. And that's really where the industry is going, is you need to be able to ingest this huge quantity of data at the packet level and at the process level, and then the anomalies stick out like a sore thumb. Thankfully, the sort of advances in big data platforms, industry-wide, they're not security specific, but just tools that allow us to ingest all this data and, and process them on platforms like Snowflake. This is pretty amazing, right? And so the tooling is in place to go do it. Now we just got to put the systems in place to make it a reality.
All right. Well, keeping on that theme, winter is coming. So are the bad guys getting smarter? Are there more of them? Or is it just that, they say complexity is the enemy of security, and we may be our own worst enemies?
Yeah. Complexity is definitely the enemy of security. And so as we move to a multi-cloud world, the attack surface gets much, much bigger, much broader, much more non-traditional, right? So here's a great example. API security. So people think about, hey, the APIs that I have for an application, they're generally thinking about the north-south or internet-facing APIs. But what about all the internal-facing APIs? A cloud-native application can be made up of thousands of microservices, thousands of little tiny containerized snippets of code, each one of which has an API. So if you really want to understand the inner workings of an application, you got to look at the API. The API is the new endpoint in a Kubernetes world. What we see as happening is attackers are taking advantage of APIs that don't necessarily have a vulnerability, but they weren't coded with security in mind. For example, if I wrote an API that said, if you give me a name, I'll give you a credit card number. That same API, if you gave me 5 names, I'll give you 5 credit card numbers. If you give me 50,000 names, I'll give you 50,000 credit card numbers, right? And so attackers can take advantage of these APIs and extract huge amounts of data without actually violating the terms of the API. And so the next frontier, I really believe in the industry, is to understand and baseline the behavior of these APIs and then look for anomalous behavior. And then we can identify these attacks, even though they're not exploiting a vulnerability. They're going to be using an API either out of sequence or in a way that should never be used, and we can stop that from within.
Tom, there's a lot of people who are pessimistic out there when it comes to security because every day they wake up and there's another issue. What's your sense? Are we winning or losing this battle right now? And, do we have cause for optimism somewhere?
Yeah. I mean, look, I've been doing this for decades and I get this question all the time. And the fact of the matter is, especially when you look at ransomware, it's never going to go away, right? Because it's a good business, because most people pay the ransom. And so what we see is when, like any other business, the attackers are investing in tools to be more and more crafty, to look like legitimate application traffic and do that east-west movement so they can harvest your data. So we'll never stop them cold, but what we can do is kind of like the vaccine, right? We can make the severity of the attack much lower. And I think one of the other really interesting areas that we're focusing on is how can we automate the recovery of the attack? So using technology to speed up the recovery from ransomware. We just recently introduced Carbon Black integrated into our VMware Cloud disaster recovery. And so what this means is when we take a snapshot, we scan it and we tell you, is this known to be clean or not? So in the event that ransomware attack does get through, we're going to go sit through and say, here's the last known verified clean snapshot, and you've now defined your recovery point. And I believe over time, we can actually start to drive that recovery point down, maybe even to 0. Which would effectively be an antidote to ransomware. It's like, you got ransomed, but don't worry, I restored you right back to where you were before the attack happened. You don't lose any data at all. So I think it's one of these things where we're going to continue to find ways to ameliorate and minimize and attenuate the threat, but never eliminate it. Yes.
All right. So inoculations may not prevent you from getting sick, but they sure as heck help you recover faster. Tom, thanks for being on the show.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Michael.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio.
Do you know what you want?
Can we afford this place?
I'm thinking 1,000-piece Kubernetes, cloud workload protection, and XDR combo.
Yeah, I actually don't see any prices.
Hello, how can I schedule a demo for you today?
So we're on a budget. Okay. How much is your 1,000-piece Kubernetes?
What solutions are you currently evaluating?
You don't have to order off that thing.
We don't?
How did you get in here? Check this out.
Optic secret dollar menu.
Order today and you can secure any combo of cloud and endpoint assets through the end of next year. All for $1.
What if I want to secure 100 Mac laptops and 900 Linux servers?
Yeah, $1. What if I want 500 laptops and 500 Kubernetes nodes? Just $1? Yep, mix and match to create the combo that works for you.
What about customer support?
Yep, everything for just $1. We're gonna order off the Uptick secret dollar menu. And seriously, how did you get in here?
Seriously.
Try the Uptick's combo of CNAP and XDR, delivered in a single UI and data model. Just $1 to secure your cloud, containers, and laptops through the end of next year. Offer ends December 31st.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We had some amazing interviews with industry professionals to give you the latest in the tech world. And alongside our airing of The Lab with Brendan O'Leary and Engineering the Change, we had plenty of great content. We'll be back again on Monday, so we hope to see you then. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, stay strong. Techstrong.